Chapter 584. The soft curtains were like a thin layer of mist. On the small table made of cyan jade in front of the bed, the agarwood turned into green smoke and slowly escaped from the hole of the incense burner, calming one's mind. Ning was lying on the bed, biting a piece of cork tightly. Suddenly, she took out a blue satin ribbon from under the pillow and tied it to her forehead. Then she tightened it. The expected pain came. She was like a small fish that jumped ashore. Her thin and weak body would bend sharply when she could not bear it anymore. Her strength was amazing. Her head was about to explode. Her bones seemed to be broken inch by inch. She was completely out of control. Sweat oozed out little by little and quickly covered her pale cheeks. She had used up too much of her strength today. Traveling was a luxury for her, and it was fine for her to take a stroll once in a while. However, the physical exertion today was a little too much for her weak body. When she was still in Farang restaurant, she had already predicted that she would experience a pain worse than death today. Strangely, the pain that made her want to pull out her hair and hit her head against the wall didn't come today. Her mind didn't have the urge to end her life every time she was in so much pain that she wanted to die. There seemed to be an opening in her mind. Traces of agarwood floated up and seeped into her mind, like the fragrance of lotus seeds. Well, that person, what was his name again? Ning bit her lips in pain and clutched the bedsheets tightly. Her small and delicate face was covered with fine beads of sweat. She couldn't remember who she was thinking of or what he looked like. She could only vaguely remember his sunny smile, which made her feel a little warm and happy. Duguyu walked along the winding and deep corridor of the Zhu Pavilion to Ning's boudoir. Seeing two maids in cyan standing at the door, he stopped and asked in a low voice, "Ningke is resting?" The two maids in cyan didn't dare to speak and just nodded gently. Duguyu wanted to say something, but stopped. He lowered his head and kept silent for a while. Then he sighed softly and turned away. He came with brisk steps, but left with heavy steps. After suffering for a long time, maybe as long as a century, Ning exhausted her last bit of strength, and the splitting headache finally disappeared. She didn't even have the strength to open her eyes. Her white teeth gently loosened the cork, on which there was a row of deep teeth marks. Looking at her slender figure and elegant face, most people would think that she was 7 or 8 years younger than her brother, and that she was only a 15 or 16-year-old young girl. Only the people of the Duga family and those who were familiar with the Duga family knew that she and Duguyu were twin siblings. The heavens had given the Dugu family a pair of twins. The siblings were both good-looking, and the younger sister was especially intelligent. She had displayed extraordinary intelligence since she was young. Her father and grandfather hadn't lived long. Her brother had become the lord of a clan in his 20s and led the entire clan back to its former glory. It was all thanks to her, the female Zhuge, that she had schemed in secret. She, the seemingly fragile girl, was the real soul of this generation of the Dugu family. God gave her extraordinary wisdom, but also gave her a disease that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She was fine when she was young. She could run and jump like an ordinary girl and was just as naughty. But as she grew older, the disease hidden deep inside her body began to wreak havoc. Her headaches became more and more frequent, and her body became weaker and weaker. With the financial resources of the Duga family, they could invite famous doctors from all over the world. But no one could cure her. Even the best doctors could only prescribe some medicine to relieve the pain and some medicinal diet to nourish the body. Her appetite was also affected because of her frequent headaches. Without the nourishment of medicinal diet, her normal intake of food couldn't support her life. Ning would suffer every time she had a headache. But today's attack was still light. Since she knew that no one could cure her headaches, Ning refused to let anyone be around her. She had an unusual self-esteem and didn't want anyone to see her in pain and weakness. Ning had the most fragile body, but also the most tenacious spirit. The pain gradually disappeared. The bone-piercing feeling of imminent death also gradually weakened. The frown on her delicate face disappeared. Ning suddenly remembered who she had just thought of. It was that young Fan. He was sometimes resolute, sometimes awe-inspiring, sometimes rascally, and sometimes cunning. Ning thought of how he pretended to compliment Lu Binji in the Farong restaurant, how Lu Binji had to cooperate with him in pretending to be his rival in love even though he wanted to bite him to death, and how Lu Biantian, the magistrate of the Chang and local government, had a weird expression on his face. Ning slowly smiled. This smile consumed all the strength she had just saved up, but she still had to smile. Laughter was a very luxurious thing for her. How could she give it up when she had the opportunity to get it? In the early morning, Duguyu came to his younger sister's boudoir again. Ning had already washed up and had breakfast. It was a bowl of crepe shrimp wonton with 4 small wontons and a small bowl of fresh soup. Ning, are you going to see Taiping? Yes. Duguyu frowned and said, You'd better not go. Taiping knows your situation. He won't blame you. Ning smiled and said, If you want to go, I will go. You also go. Not for Taiping, but for Yongfan. Duguyu said doubtfully, Yesterday, he offended both the Liu and Li families. Offending these 2 families is equal to offending all the aristocratic families in Shandong. We all avoid them. Do you still want to be allies with them? Ning sighed and said softly, Silly brother, go get ready first. Let's talk in the car, okay? Okay. Duguyu was so obedient to this younger sister that even his father was jealous of him when he was alive. With steady steps, the 2 big green bulls pulled a green oil cleaning cart and slowly drove toward Yongkong Square. In the carriage, Ning leaned on a comfortable and soft, semi-reclining soft couch and explained to her eldest brother in a low voice, Why did I persuade you to get close to the 7th sex and 5 families? Because the decline of our Guanlong aristocratic family is a foregone conclusion. Ning was weak and spoke in a very low voice. Sometimes she had to drink water to moisten her throat and rest for a while. But Duguyu had long been used to talking with her like this. He neither urged nor rushed her. Sometimes when she talked too much, he would stop her and force her to rest for a while. When the world is stable, the military power will be concentrated in the emperor. Only civil officials can rule the world. Our Guanlong aristocratic family thrives on the military and will also perish because of the military. Since the death of Zhang Sunwuji, the imperial examination was abolished and the military power was centralized. Our Guanlong aristocratic family no longer exists, but the aristocratic families in Shandong are different. Although Duguyu listened to his younger sister's words, it was only because he had been used to his younger sister's vision and wisdom since he was a child. But he was not an ignorant waste. Hearing this, he couldn't help saying, Since the time of Taizong, the aristocratic families in Shandong have been suppressed. They are not what they used to be. Ning smiled and shook her head. When the wind is strong, the grass and trees will fall. When the wind is gone, the grass and trees will rise. Taizong wrote the annals of clans to promote the Guanlong aristocratic family and demote the aristocratic families in Shandong. The empress wanted to ascend the throne, but was obstructed by the Guanlong aristocratic family. So she did the opposite and used the aristocratic families in Shandong to disintegrate the Guanlong aristocratic family. After the empress ascended the throne, she wanted to get rid of the aristocratic families in Shandong. Therefore, she vigorously promoted the Han aristocratic families. Unfortunately, it was useless. The power that the aristocratic families in Shandong had already grasped could not be taken back. The imperial examination system was not a panacea. The reason why the aristocratic families in Shandong had not declined for thousands of years was that they had mastered the inheritance of culture. In order to resist the aristocratic families in Shandong, the empress did promote a group of poor commoners through the imperial examination. But this was not enough to shake the aristocratic families in Shandong. The aristocratic families in Shandong had always entered officialdom through the imperial examination. At first, they were just disdainful and unwilling to enter officialdom through the imperial examination. When they realized that this was irreversible, how many people in the Han aristocratic families could surpass them? Once they adapted to the imperial examination and entered officialdom, with the profound family customs and cultural traditions of the aristocratic families, they would have a great advantage. Just look at the number of scholars who passed the imperial examination in recent years, and you should know this clearly. Moreover, the powerful ministers of humble origins were indeed hostile to the aristocratic families at first. However, their hatred of the rich was only due to envy, because they also wanted to be rich. Once they became a member of the rich, they would be assimilated, and those who were initially opposed to them would become their allies. The nouveau riche wanted to become an aristocratic family after gaining a foothold. There were many talents in the 7 sects and 5 families. How could they not see this? As long as they were willing to lower their statuses, these powerful officials of the Han clan would fight to the death to become the son-in-law of the landowning households. They would befriend them and use this to raise their status. In the end, they would be assimilated into the landowning households. Can the imperial examination really destroy the aristocratic families? Ningke smiled faintly and said, "Even 500 years of effort can't do it, unless there is a great turmoil that will last for 100 years and completely destroy the existence of the aristocratic families." Duguyu lowered his eyes and pondered. "So, you want me to get close to the 7 sects and 5 families at all costs, and be the first to get close to this big tree?" Duguyu raised his eyebrows and asked, "But what does this have to do with Yang Fan?" Ningke said, "Because the Shandong aristocratic families have always been wary of our Guanlong aristocratic families. Our sincere efforts to make friends with them have never dispelled their wariness. After a few years of hard work, we only managed to get closer to them and gain some benefits from mutual benefits. This is not the way for the Dugu family to survive." Duguyu's eyes flashed, and he said, "Can Yang Fan do it?" Ningke said, "That's right. After the Shandong aristocratic families were suppressed by the Empress, they have already begun to fight back after many years of adaptation and preparation. Adapting to and responding to the imperial examinations is one thing, and absorbing outstanding talents from poor families and commoners for their own use is another. Because of our background, they're wary of us, but they will take the initiative to absorb people like Yang Fan." Duguyu said, "The Shandong aristocratic families have taken the initiative to absorb many talents, and Yang Fan is not the only one. If Yang Fan doesn't have great ability, what use is he to us?" Ningke smiled and said, "This is the reason why I asked Elder Brother to gather information about the Shandong aristocratic families. From the information we have, perhaps Yang Fan was just a small fish in their wide net at the beginning, but now this small fish has grown into a big fish." Ningke's eyes were like 2 black gems set on his thin and delicate face, shining brightly. When the wind and clouds gather, he can shed his scales and change his armor, leaping into the sky and becoming a dragon. Duguyu frowned and said, "Where will the wind and clouds come from?" It was still that soft voice. "Although I can't move mountains and fill the seas, I still have the ability to summon wind and rain." Chapter 585. Duguyu didn't ask his sister how she could call the wind and summon the rain, nor did he ask her what kind of height Yang Fan could reach once the wind and clouds gathered. Ever since he was young, his experience had long since told him that what his sister said would never be wrong. He didn't understand and naturally wanted to ask, but his sister had said too much and consumed too much energy, so he didn't want to ask. However, even if he felt sorry for his sister, he still had to ask another question in his mind. Because he was the head of the Dugu family, he had to make the final decision. He didn't dare to make a decision without asking clearly. Duguyu took a deep breath and asked softly, "But now Yang Fan has offended the aristocratic families in Shandong. The big fish is about to become a dead fish. What's the use of him?" Ningke shook her head gently and said no. He only offended the Lu family, but got the appreciation of the entire aristocratic families in Shandong. Duguyu raised his eyebrows. He still didn't understand, but seeing that his sister was already tired, he couldn't bear to ask any more. But Ning still struggled to explain the aristocratic families in Shandong are not monolithic. Just like the current imperial court of the great Zhou dynasty, when foreign enemies come, all the officials and military officers in the court work together to resist the foreign enemies. But this does not prevent them from scheming and deceiving each other. Yang Fan has a good grasp of the scale. He's only challenging the Lu clan, not the aristocratic families of Shandong. After saying this, Dugu Ning closed her pair of smart eyes. She needed to rest for a while. Dugu Yu had already understood that the aristocratic families in Shandong were united against the outside world, but they also schemed against each other internally. In the past, when Emperor Xiaowen of Wei ranked the aristocratic families in the world, the Lu family of Fanyang, the Chui family of Qinghe, the Zheng family of Yingyang, and the Wang family of Taiyuan were the top 4 aristocratic families in the world. At that time, the Li family of Longxi was worried that they wouldn't be able to hold the position. So the head of the family rushed to Luoyang on a camel at night, but he was still one step late. But at the end of the Sui dynasty and the beginning of the Tang dynasty, the power of the Wang family of Taiyuan was greatly reduced, and the aristocratic families in the world were ranked again. The 4 aristocratic families became the Chui family, the Lu family, the Li family, and the Zheng family. The Wang family was eliminated, and the Li family not only became one of the 4 aristocratic families, but also ranked the 3rd. The Lu family, which ranked the 1st, was reduced to the 2nd, and the Chui family, which ranked the 2nd, was promoted to the 1st. The intensity of the secret competition between the aristocratic families could be seen. After that, the 4 families evolved into the 7 sects and 5 families, and the competition became even more intense. The Chui clan of Boling and the Chui clan of Qinghe constantly competed against each other for ranking and status. The Li clan of Longxi and the Li clan of Zhao County also constantly competed against each other. Even among the same surname, the relationship between the other surnames could be imagined. Although the aristocratic families of Shandong had always advanced and retreated together with outsiders, and they had the obligation to take care of each other in addition to competing with each other through marriage, who would interpret Yang Fan's actions in Furong Tavern as a threat and challenge to the entire aristocratic families of Shandong. It was just the opposite. Without the Lu clan, whose strength was only inferior to the Chui clan, the other aristocratic clans of Shandong would have even more benefits to share. It was even to the extent that the few great clans that were ranked below the Lu clan had a chance to use this opportunity to catch up to, or even surpass the Lu clan. Perhaps they wouldn't be grateful to Yang Fan because of this, but at the very least, they wouldn't arouse hostility towards him. After thinking it through, Dugu Yu finally felt at ease. Looking at his sister's haggard face, Dugu Yu felt guilty and distressed. He gently pulled a thin skirt and wrapped it around her waist, saying softly, "Have a good rest." The ox cart moved forward slowly along Vermilion Bird Main Street while making squeaking noises. The tall gate of Yongkong workshop could already be seen from afar. Dugu Ningku's light and steady breathing was like a cat taking a nap. But when the cart turned into Yongkong Lane and was about to reach the princess mansion, she woke up as if she had calculated the time. "Elder brother, have we arrived?" Dugu Yu hurriedly helped her sit up and said, "Soon, we will be there soon." Dugu Yu lifted the curtain and looked outside. The corner of his mouth hooked up as he suddenly chuckled and said, "I heard that this Yang Fan is Taiping's gigolo." Alas! Taiping, if Prince Shui was still alive, Taiping would not be like this. Ning snorted and said, "Do you think it's possible?" Dugu Yu thought for a while, and the sneer on his face quietly disappeared. Yes, was it possible? A man who turned a blind eye to thousands of hectares of fertile land, 10% of the Lianghuai salt works, 100 Silla Korean beauties, and the opportunity of 3 relatives and family members to become officials. A man who would rather offend the Lu family than step down and take a step back. How could he be a gigolo? Ningku's voice was still soft and weak, but there was a kind of firm appreciation in his bones. "He is a man." Yang Fan asked Feng Yuanyi curiously, Why not go to Chang'an? Dr. Sun has already promised to take care of you for me before I return to the capital. This young man seemed to be 14 or 15 years old, but his age and mind were still that of a 10-year-old. When he heard that Yang Fan would not return to Luoyang with the princess's carriage, he became a little restless. Just now, he finally found a chance and quietly pulled the corner of Yang Fan's clothes. Yang Fan came to his senses and led him to a corner of the courtyard. Feng Yuni hesitantly said what he was thinking. I want to follow Brother Yang. Brother Yang will eventually return to Luoyang, right? Yang Fan rubbed his chin and said, Yes, of course I will return to Luoyang, but Feng Yuni hurriedly said, Then it doesn't matter. Then I will wait here. We will leave together when Brother Yang returns to Luoyang. Brother Yang, don't worry. I won't cause you any trouble. I will stay at home every day and won't go anywhere. It was Yang Fan who had saved Feng Yuanli's life when his family and friends were destroyed. Sun Yuxuan and Hu Yuanli naturally did not speak ill of him, but they also did not act affectionately toward him. In Feng Yuanli's heart, Yang Fan was the only person he could be close to and trust in Chang. And now that Yang Fan wanted to entrust him to a stranger, he naturally felt uneasy. Although Yang Fan did not really understand what he was thinking, he saw Feng Yuanli looking at him nervously. After a moment of hesitation, he nodded and said, Okay, then you can stay. In a while, after we send off the princess, you will come with me to live in the Gongsun residence. Thank you, Brother Yang. Feng Yuanli beamed and bowed to Yang Fan. Then he obediently moved to the side so that he would not disturb Yang Fan's conversation with others. Feng Yuanli was the son of the Pan provincial governor and the son of the Lingnan emperor. He had lived like a prince since he was young, but after this disaster he quickly matured. Suffering always made people mature. Brother Fan, when will you return to Luoyang? Ma Qiao walked over casually. He did not have the strict aura that he had when he saw him in the Furong restaurant. Haha, don't worry. No matter what, I will not go back until your baby's full moon banquet is over. Yang Fan joked to Ma Qiao and then said seriously, I think the imperial court will not agree to it if I delay too long. Although the illness is very serious, it will at most delay for a month. Including the time needed for the return trip, I will return to Luoyang in a month and a half at most. The reason why Yang Fan stayed was because he was suffering from a serious illness. Other than Princess Taiping, only Hu Yuanli and Sun Yuxuan were present. These two had gone through trials and tribulations together. Now that Yang Fan stayed, it was only to wait for the birth of his child. This was human nature. It was not a crime, so who would not help him? As for Lu Qiantian, Lu Fujun was waiting in the front hall with a group of civil and military officials. Yang Fan and the others were invited to the middle hall as an exception. After a while, when they went out, Yang Fan had to be supported by someone. He was weak and listless. As for Lu Fujun, he had seen Yang Fan go crazy with the young master of the Lu family for a woman from the Duga family with his own eyes yesterday. Ahem. I am very sorry. Big Lord Yang was suffering from an emergency this morning. A long-distance carriage drove on the Blue Bridge. Under the bridge, the river was flowing rapidly. The Blue Brook was like broken jade and snowflakes splashing white waves. It spun and rolled far away, disappearing. The carriage had obviously traveled a long way, but it was as clean as a speck of dust. Even the shaft of the carriage had been washed, revealing the original color of clean wood. In the carriage, young Master Zhang's clothes were as white as snow. They were also clean and spotless. On his slender fingers, there was a snow-white letter spread out. The carriage moved very steadily. Young Master Zhang slowly read the letter in his hand. His slender fingers slowly closed and tightly grasped the letter. The white-haired Lu Boyan was sitting on the side, looking at him calmly. Young Master Zhang took a deep breath and slowly said, My Lu clan will all return to Fanyang. For the next 3 years, we will not be allowed to leave. Lu Boyan slightly frowned, but still did not speak. Young Master Zhang's mouth slightly curled up, and he smiled strangely. My plan to come to Chang and has been completely ruined. Lu Boyan could not help but ask, why? Young Master Zhang slowly leaned against the seat and closed his eyes. After a while, he spat out 2 words like autumn frost. Yang Fan. Young Master Zhang's secret returned to Chang, and this time was also for the vacant official positions in the southern border. If he operated well and fought for a few more positions, it would be of great help to him. Although for the imperial court, the key decision-makers were all in Luoyang, for the aristocratic families, the key decision-makers were in Chang'an. If young Master Zhang wanted to benefit from it, he had to consult, communicate, negotiate, and compromise with the big shots behind the scenes of the aristocratic families. Although young Master Zhang was defeated by Shinmu, they were only fighting for internal power and status. Everyone was of the same lineage, and no one could fight with each other for life and death. It was fine for him to return to Chang, and in a dignified manner. But this was originally his territory. Now that he had lost to Shinmu, how could the proud young Master Zhang have the face to openly return? Moreover, he did not need to reveal his identity to do what he wanted to do. It was more convenient for him to secretly contact them. So young Master Zhang's whereabouts were very secretive. Who knew that before he reached Chang, and all his plans were like a dream, and in the blink of an eye, they were all gone. Yang Fan! Young Master Zhang's chest suddenly surged with anger. His eyes opened wide, and there was a cold look in them. Chapter 586. Princess Taiping slowly walked out from the backyard. Because of the departure today, the officials of Chang, and even some rich families of Chang, and had come to see them off. So Princess Taiping was dressed up. She was still charming, but she looked more noble than usual. The first thing she saw was Yang Fan. She stared at him deeply, but didn't say anything. Yang Fan was the same. Even if everyone thought they had the most intimate relationship between a man and a woman, they still had to restrain their feelings. The moment she saw Yang Fan, Princess Taiping's eyes flashed a trace of reluctance, but it was immediately replaced by a strong look. She had to leave no matter how reluctant she was. Going back to Luoyang was more important than staying with her Lang Jun, no matter how long she had been looking forward to being with him in Chang. Since the day she was born and became the daughter of an empress, she was no longer just a woman. Love, husband, children, and family were never everything to her. Princess Taiping just stared at Yang Fan deeply, and then smiled and nodded to Hu Yuanli, Sun Yuxuan, Ma Qiao, and others, accepting their worship. Miss Hu Fei accompanied Princess Taiping. She was still in the Miao costume, but she had more jewelry than when she was in the barbarian province. Her head, neck, shoulders, arms, wrists, waist, ankles, and her whole body was covered with round, flat, thin and long bells, tubes and tassels, shining with silver light. These were all bought by Sun Yuxuan for her. Women from the Central Plains would find it cumbersome to wear more than 4 or 5 pieces of jewelry. Maybe it was because of the special shape of these Miao ornaments, or because of the special color of Miss Hu Fei's clothes, but these silver ornaments were very suitable for her. They didn't feel complicated at all, but they made her more beautiful, revealing the unique cleverness of a Miao girl. Even when she walked, her whole body jingled, and the sound was as sweet as music without a trace of noise. Sun Yuxuan's eyes suddenly brightened when he saw her, but he still maintained the reserved face of an official. Miss Hu Fei didn't care about that. She was already happily flying to her man with a touch of charm. Princess Taiping's housekeeper came to her side and reported in a low voice, Lord Sun, officials of Chang'an and aristocratic families are waiting for your highness in the front hall. Princess Taiping nodded and said, let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Fan's body tilted to one side, his eyelids drooped, his eyes were lifeless, and his breathing was weak. Fortunately, Feng Yuanyi, who was standing next to him, was a 10-year-old urchin, but his body was as sturdy as a 14 or 15-year-old boy. so he was able to support Yang Fan. Princess Taiping stared at Yang Fan, and there was an undisguised amusement in her eyes, and said, "You off. Yang Fan, it is better." Yang Fan smiled dryly. Princess Taiping said snappily, "We haven't reached the front hall yet." Taiping said, "Ping, ping, Taiping, Princess Taiping, Lu, Taiping, Lu Taiping, Princess off." As soon as Lu Chechen and the others saw Princess Taiping appear, they all went forward to greet her. Yang Fan was also one step ahead, leaning on Feng Yuanyi's body with a sickly look. Lu Chentian paid his respects to Princess Taiping. When Princess Taiping was chatting with the Guanlong family members, he saw Yang Fan's appearance and couldn't help but walk up to him. He asked curiously, "Dr. Yang Yu?" Lu Chechen greeted Princess Taiping, and when Princess Taiping was talking with the Guanlong nobles, he saw Yang Fan's condition. He couldn't help but walk forward and ask curiously, "Yang Langzhou?" Lu Chechen said in surprise, "So it is like this. Have you asked a famous doctor to treat you?" Yang Fan nodded slowly. "I have. Sickness comes like a landslide and goes like spinning silk. I have to rest." Lu Chechen rubbed his teeth and said, "Doctor, you have to be careful on your long journey." Yang Fan said weakly, "I can't go. Your Highness is kind enough to allow me to recuperate here." Just as he said this, a servant hurriedly came to report, "Your Highness, Duga Yu and Duga Ning could have arrived." Princess Taiping was holding hands and chatting with a lady of the Wei clan. Hearing this, she couldn't help but be shocked and said, "Ning Ku is here? Why is he? I will go and welcome him." Princess Taiping certainly knew that Ning Ku was suffering from a chronic illness and didn't have many opportunities to go out. Although they were childhood friends, Princess Taiping wouldn't be surprised if she didn't come to see him off. Hearing that she was coming, Princess Taiping was really shocked and wanted to go and welcome her personally. Unexpectedly, she had just taken 2 steps when Duga Yu and Ning Ku walked into the hall. The maid who used to dress as a boat girl held Ning Ku's arm. Ning Ku stood straight and didn't use the maid's strength. The maid supported him just in case the girl suddenly fainted. Taiping hurriedly came forward to greet them, and the others also followed. Among the crowd, Yang Fan was supported by Feng Yuanyi, who was dressed as a servant in cyan clothes and a hat. He looked so weak that he seemed to be even more delicate than Miss Ning Ku, which was really eye-catching. How could Miss Ning Ku not see him? They looked at each other at the same time. Ning Ku slightly frowned her eyebrows. Ning Ku had been sick for a long time, and her eyesight was very sharp. Besides, she seemed to have an innate ability to see through Yang Fan's mind. So she just took a glance at him and felt, "This guy seems to be pretending to be sick." Yang Fan also felt a little guilty. How can this weak little girl's eyesight be so sharp? It seems that she saw through me. Princess Taiping and Duga Yu said a few polite words, and then came to Ning Ku, held her arm and complained, "You, I won't blame you if you don't come. You don't have to take the trouble to come by yourself." Ning Ku said softly, "You have been living in Luoyang for a long time, and it's rare for you to return to Cheng. How can I not see you off?" The two chatted for a while, and then everyone boarded the carriages, ready to send the princess out of the city. Princess Taiping helped Duga Ning Ku to sit in the carriage with her. It was easy to distinguish the other people. The officials all rode horses, while the aristocratic families all rode ox carts. There was only one exception. Yang also rode in an ox cart, and his carriage drove slower than those of the aristocratic families. At the 10 Miles Pavilion, everyone stopped, and it was time to say goodbye to Princess Taiping. Ning Ku got off the carriage, supported by her personal maid, and stood side by side with Yang Fan, who was also pretending to be weak. Everyone said goodbye one after another. Princess Taiping had returned the salute, boarded the carriage, and turned her head. Finally, she couldn't help staring at Yang Fan, and then gently raised her hand. With a pull of her hand, the bamboo curtain of the sedan slowly fell down, covering her beautiful hair, her black brows, and her pair of eyes that were staring deeply into the distance. The whip cracked in the air, and the princess's carriages, escorted by 300 dragon guards, set off for Luoyang. Standing next to Yang Fan, Miss Ning withdrew her gaze from the carriages and said in a low voice, "Yang Langzhong didn't go back to Luoyang with the princess. Is it because he is not feeling well?" Yang Fan was about to let Feng Yuani help him turn around and board the carriage, but stopped when he heard this. Miss Ning's lips curled into a mysterious smile. The Dugu family invites several famous doctors to stay in their mansion all year round. Dugu, who was beside her, understood and said hurriedly, "Look at Erling, you look so weak. Why don't we ask our doctor to treat you again?" Okay, then. I will some other day. Hey, there is no other day. Come on, get on my ox cart. Since you are sick, of course, the sooner you are treated, the better. Dugu took Yang Fan's other arm and dragged him into his carriage. At this time, the aristocratic families and the officials were about to leave, and no one paid special attention to their conversation. Yesterday, at Chu Zhang's hibiscus garden, Li Taigong wouldn't make a big deal out of it. Dugu wouldn't make a big deal out of it. Lu Qiantian wouldn't make a big deal out of it. And the people of the Lu family wouldn't make a big deal out of it, other than a few important figures of the aristocratic families who already knew the whole story. Most people were still in the dark. Today, those who came to see off Princess Taiping were the younger generation of various aristocratic families. They hadn't heard the news. Otherwise, they wouldn't have ignored this delicate Yang Langzhong. Seeing Yang Fan board her eldest brother's carriage, with difficulty, Ning couldn't help but smile. Today, she forced herself to see off Princess Taiping with her sick body, but her main purpose was still Yang Fan. For her next plan, she planned to let her elder brother go with her, or follow her to Luoyang. Now that Yang Fan stayed because of his illness, it was really a surprise. How could she not take Yang Fan to the Dugu mansion? Yesterday, in the lotus garden, Li Taigong's eyes, as if he had found a treasure, could be hidden from others, but not from her. She and Li Taigong were a pair of friends who had a hobby of collecting antiques. When Yang Fan was about to leave, Li Taigong looked at him as if he had found a living treasure that had been buried in the soil for thousands of years. Ning could guess that Li Taigong might immediately send someone to the Gong Sun mansion after knowing that Yang Fan didn't go with the princess. What a pity! Green damask was taken by Li Taigong, but Yang Fan fell into my hands first. Thinking of this, Ning couldn't help but smile. Ning was sitting in the carriage, and his smile was seen by the boat lady, which really shocked her. She had been responsible for taking care of Ning's daily life since he was very young. Miss had strict rules, except for her, who had been taking care of Miss since she was born. No one was allowed to enter Miss's room easily. Miss's body couldn't accept other people's touch, so she was always the only one who took care of Miss's bath. In fact, the closeness between her and Miss was even less than that of Miss's mother. So in this world, there was no one who knew Miss better than her. Although Miss spent most of her time awake in contemplation, it was rare to see her smile when she was thinking, not to mention that her smile was so sweet. In the boat lady's mind, this kind of situation could be counted on one hand, and the other few times had happened when Miss was a child or a young girl. Yang Fan got on the carriage. As soon as the curtain was put down, he sat up straight, his eyelids were no longer drooping, and he was no longer listless. He knew that the Dugu siblings had seen through the truth. So why did he still pretend? Yang Fan said to Dugu with a smile, "Brother Dugu, why did you drag me into the mansion? To hold a banquet, to apologize?" "No," Dugu said very seriously. "I want to make a deal with Lang Zhong." Chapter 587. The long line of carriages returned to the city and dispersed to the houses where they were located. In the first carriage of the Dugu family, Dugu was talking with Yang Fan. In the second carriage, Miss Ning was dozing off. She curled up her body like a well-behaved kitten. The boat lady sat on the edge of the bed and lovingly brushed aside a lock of hair that brushed against her cheek, as if she was taking care of her own young daughter. Heroes can create the current situation, and the current situation can also create heroes. Many times, heroes and the current situation complement each other. Heroes are water, and the current situation is also not enough. Heroes are water, and the current situation is a form. Only when water and form interact can they stir up monstrous waves and roar for thousands of miles. Just like this time, Erlang went from Yaozhou to barbarian, and from barbarian to Panzhou, resulting in the current situation in southern frontier. Among them, the barbarian officials, the cruel officials of the imperial censor, and you, Erlang, have all done different things. Together, they created this situation. For all parties, the results are different. For the imperial censor, it is a disaster, but for Erlang, although there is no harm, there is not much benefit. Duguyu spoke very slowly. His words were clear and orderly, revealing a convincing feeling. He was not a fool. Even if he was the eldest grandson of the first wife, he would not be able to sit in this position, even if he had the help of his younger sister. Aristocratic families naturally had their own way of survival for thousands of years. They respected the system of the eldest son of the first wife, but if the eldest son of the first wife was useless, they would not hesitate to abandon him. The reason is that Erlang did not grasp this opportunity. Therefore, many people who originally had nothing to do with this matter can instead take advantage of this situation to gain benefits. For example, Heir Wu, Heir Zhang, Taiping, aristocratic families, powerful ministers, and relatives of nobles all move upon hearing the benefits. However, Erlang, who created all of this, cannot gain any benefit from it. For example, Qin Shang and Wu Guang rebelled, but what they achieved was Liu Bang's hegemony and Xiang Yu's eternal fame. This kind of situation has existed since ancient times. The one who first stirred up a storm would eventually decline due to various reasons. A small figure who had been a subordinate at that time could eventually be the one who achieved great things. Another example in our dynasty, the crown prince Li Chengqian and the second Di-son Weiwang Li Tai fought over heirs, but in the end they became Emperor Gaozong's wedding dress. Liu Bang, Xiang Yu, Gaozong, and the others were born with a good life. They did not have to fight for anything, and the heavens would give them such great benefits. That was because they were able to accurately judge opportunities, seize opportunities, and make use of the situation. When it was not time to take action, he would conceal his strength and conceal his strength. When it was time to take action, he would not hesitate. In this way, with the help of karmic luck and the current situation, there was no need to worry about not being able to accomplish great things. Erlang is a hero. It's a pity that such a good opportunity has passed him by. My Duga family can help Erlang take advantage of the situation. Yang Fan touched his nose and said with a smile, "Brother Dugu's words are making my blood boil. But does Brother Dugu really know what I want? If we want to do great things together, we have to be like-minded in order to go far." Duguyu said, "Even if you don't say it, I can still roughly guess. Since Erlang is friends with Shenmu, at least he is not a loyal official of the Empress, helping the Li family and restoring the Tang dynasty. This should be one of Erlang's wishes, right? On this point, our aspirations are the same. Erlang, as an official of the imperial court, being able to work with Shenmu shows that you also have your own pursuits. Perhaps you are not passionate about power, but there is no doubt that what you want to do requires power. On this point, as long as we cooperate, you can also take a step forward towards your goal. No, it's a big step forward." Yang Fan was secretly shocked when he heard this. If Duguyu could even guess this, then the others. Then he remembered that the Duga family was a part of the Guanlong group. From the close relationship between Miss Ning, Ku, and Old Li, they were also close to the Shandong aristocrats. Anti-military was the common goal of the Shandong aristocrats and the Guanlong group, so it was not unusual for them to cooperate. On the other hand, Shin Mu was the helmsman of the succession hall set up by the Shandong aristocrats. His main area of activity was in Chang and Anlongyu. As long as Duguyu wanted to, it was not unusual for him to find out about the cooperation between him and Shin Mu. As for the second Zhang, the second Wu, and even the emperor, it was impossible for them to find out if they didn't expose this layer of window paper. Yang Fan's relationship with the succession hall was that of an ally, so he naturally had a lot of freedom in choosing allies, especially now that the succession hall was split into two. The hidden sect, which was originally attached to the obvious sect, became independent and became an independent force. The obvious sect and the hidden sect fought openly and secretly, restraining each other. He was a friend of the hidden sect and an enemy of the obvious sect, so he had even more freedom. Therefore, if there were other forces that could cooperate with him and help him achieve his goals, Yang Fan didn't mind making one more force. But in this way, his relationship with the hidden sect couldn't be as close as it was now. The entire Guanlong group had declined, so how much help could the Dugu family provide? The gains and losses involved in this. Yang Fan lowered his eyelids and pondered for a moment. He slowly raised his head and his eyes turned sharp. What does brother Dugu want me to do? And what can you provide me? Duguyu became nervous. He knew that the next words would be crucial to whether or not he could convince Yang Fan. A dozen big white geese swaggered over at a leisurely pace, squawking solemnly. Although they were fighting for food, they still had the demeanor of a gentleman. Many people like to raise pets, and Li Mubai liked to raise white geese the most. He was wearing a linen robe, and he threw down the food in his hand with a smile. He clapped his hands and asked Lin Zixiong, who was standing at the side, "What's wrong? Was Yang Fan taken away by that last Ningko?" "Yes. I went to the Gongsun residence and asked. I found out that Yang Fan didn't go back, but his ox cart did. I asked the coachman and found out that Yang Fan was invited by the Dugu family to treat him. When Li Mubai heard that his younger generation returned and said that Yang Fan didn't leave with Princess Taiping, he immediately asked Lin Zixiong to invite him. But Lin Zixiong came up empty-handed. Yang Fan didn't return to the residence at all. Li Mubai chuckled. "See? You're wondering why this old man values this young man so much. That lass, Ning Ku, has a pair of eyes that can recognize treasures. Since she has fallen in love with him, how can this person be lacking?" Lin Zixiong smiled and said, "Yes. This little one is ignorant and doesn't understand great-grandfather's true meaning." Li Mubai shook his head, walked to a rattan chair under the grape trellis, and sat down. A big white goose dragged itself over and pecked at his wooden clogs a few times. Li Mubai smiled and lifted his legs, saying, "Go, go!" After driving away the big white goose, Li Mubai lay on the rattan chair, closed his eyes, shook his body gently, and said, "Each of our aristocratic families is extraordinary and has a wide range of contacts. But if we think carefully compared with the imperial power, each of us is very weak. If we fight against the imperial power with the strength of one family, the result can be imagined. But when a family has such a large scale, it naturally has its own demands. The strength of one family is not enough to fight against the imperial power, and it is impossible to continue to expand and change the dynasty to rule the world by itself. So the only way is to unite. Unite with other noble aristocratic families. One aristocratic family is not enough to be feared, but what about 10 or hundreds of them? If dozens or hundreds of aristocratic families form an alliance, they will have the strength to bargain with the imperial power. But this is not a war between two armies, and it is also impossible to look down on the imperial power like this. It is impossible to openly tell the emperor that we, the aristocratic families, are one, and we want to discuss things with him. Then what should we do? So we can only use our huge influence to hide our demands under the demands of the people of the world through various levels, and then feed it back to the emperor. And to do these things, there must be someone to coordinate, arrange, and act on our behalf. Let him summarize and balance the demands of the aristocratic families, and then take the lead to exert influence on the imperial court. Lin Zixiong carefully said, "Aren't these things done by the succession hall now?" Li Taigong nodded, and then shook his head. "But they're not doing well, especially those two bastards. In order to fight for power, they used all their efforts on internal strife and almost no longer have any influence on the imperial court." Li Taigong lightly patted the armrest twice and said in a serious tone, "This person, it is not necessarily only one person, and it is not necessarily always the same person. Do you understand?" Lin Zixiong was somewhat moved and said in astonishment, "Could it be that Li Taigong has taken a fancy to Yang Fan?" Li Taigong crossed his hands in front of his abdomen and closed his eyes in contemplation for a moment. Then he slowly said, "It is still too early to say, or perhaps it is only for him to be of use at this time and in this matter. Whether or not he has that ability in the long run, we still don't know. Even if he has that ability, we still can't entrust him with such a heavy responsibility." Li Taigong gently sighed and said, "In the end, he is not one of us. How can the aristocratic families accept him? Last time, this old man condescended and personally went to see him, but I was disturbed by that scoundrel Lu Binji. 3 days from now, it will be my birthday. Send an invitation and call him over. This old man will see him first, and then we'll talk." Yang Fan listened to Dugayu's words and was momentarily stunned. He was frightened by his bold plan and exclaimed, "This is Brother Dugu's idea, or the idea of the entire Dugu family. How could Duguyu be vague at this time?" Without blushing, he falsely claimed his little sister's credit and said, "Of course it is my idea, and I am the Dugu family's head. My thoughts are the thoughts of the entire Dugu family. I will use the entire family's power to help you succeed." Yang Fan hesitated and said, "I'm afraid that this is not in line with the rules of Shandong's aristocratic families." Duguyu sneered and said, "Rules are meant to be broken. Since the Han and Jin dynasties, has Shandong's aristocratic families not broken the rules many times?" Yang Fan chuckled and said, "Good. Brother Dugu has really moved me. However, I have to see your abilities first before saying anything." Duguyu also laughed and said, "Of course." Yang Fan said again, "I won't be staying here for too long. At most a month, and then I have to return to Luoyang." Duguyu said cheerfully, "Time is not a problem, and distance is also not a problem. Besides, Lil, brother, has already started making preparations. Perhaps in less than a month we will see the results." Chapter 588. Yang Fan was invited to the Dugu family, under the guise that a famous doctor of the Dugu family would treat his illness. Yang Fan arrived at the Dugu family's residence. However, there was no famous doctor to take his pulse, nor was there anyone to prescribe a few decoctions for him to drink. Instead, he was eating the most exquisite dishes in the Dugu family's residence, and he was drinking fine wine. After the banquet, the host even spread a long bamboo mat in the garden and chatted with him while drinking yogurt and eating cheese. Although the Dugu family was large, not all the clansmen lived together. Each branch had their own residence in Chang, and because Duguyu and his sister were the eldest lineal branch, they lived in the largest ancestral house with their mother. Of course, the eldest lineal branch was not the most important reason. If he was not the head of the Dugu family, he would still have to move out and arrange another residence, leaving this place to the real owner of the Dugu family. Yang Fan also met the mother of Duguyu and his sister. Duguyu's mother looked very young, only 3 or 4 years older than Yang Fan, and this was because of her dress and the unique temperament and way of talking of elders. Ningku was actually 4 or 5 years older than Yang Fan, but she looked 6 or 7 years younger, probably because she inherited her mother's beauty and special constitution to slow down aging. Dugu Ningku did not eat with the guests. When Yang Fan and Duguyu sat in the garden after the banquet, she and her mother came together. Standing together, the mother and daughter looked like a pair of beautiful sisters. Madame Dugu sat with her daughter for a while, chatted with Yang Fan for a while, and then got up to leave. As soon as Madame Dugu left, Ningka stuck out her tongue and said mischievously, "Fortunately, Erling came to my house today and helped me out." Yang Fan asked curiously, "What do you mean?" Dugu smiled knowingly. "Why? Is mother in the mood for poetry, or do you want to paint?" Ningka said with a bitter face, "Mother wants to play the zither today." Dugu laughed heartily, but stopped when he saw Yang Fan's blank face. "To tell you the truth, my mother is interested in the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting, as well as poetry and songs. Every time she recites poetry, paints, plays the zither, and plays the zither, she needs someone to listen, appreciate, and comment. Haha, of course, this person is my sister." Ningka smiled and said, "But my mother only wants to hear my praise. It's impossible for me to criticize her. But I only want to criticize her when she paints or plays the zither, but I don't want to praise her." Dugu could not help but say, "But in order to make mother happy, Amme has no choice but to praise against her heart. Not a single word of her true feelings can be spoken. It's really bitter." Ningku said, "Today my mother suddenly has the mood and wants to play the zither again. Fortunately, Erling is here, so I hurriedly said that I have to accompany the guest, and then I got away." Hearing this, Yang Fan couldn't help but laugh. Although Ningku's words were exaggerated, he just saw Ningku's mother's temperament, demeanor, behavior, and style of conversation. She was obviously a lady from a respectable family, although her musical, chess, calligraphy, and poetry writing skills were not very brilliant. They were not unsightly. Ningku's words could only prove that she was 10 times better than her mother. Yang Fan could not help laughing. In this case, Miss Ningku must be very good at the zither. "I wonder if I have the honor to listen to it?" Dugu was stunned. He glanced at Ningku and wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. Ningku's pair of beautiful eyes stared at Yang Fan without blinking and suddenly said sweetly, "If Erlang doesn't mind my poor zither skills, I will show you my incompetence." She looked back at the boat girl who bowed and retreated. She thought as she walked, "Playing the zither requires all your attention. Playing the zither requires a lot of strength in both arms and fingers. Miss has not played the zither for a long time, but today she made an exception for that boy. I should have stopped her, but—" She thought about how her mistress spent her days alone, sitting quietly and rarely spoke. Her life was even more monotonous than that of a monk. It was rare for her to be in such a mood today. The boat lady sighed faintly and gave up on the idea. After a while, the boat girl brought a zither, took down all the food on the table, and put the zither on the table. Miss Ningku sat in front of the zither and put her slender fingers on the strings. Clang! As soon as the sound of the zither started, a simple, elegant, and desolate atmosphere came to their faces. It was as if the autumn air was cool, the wind was calm, the sand was flat, the clouds were thousands of miles away, and wild geese were flying in the sky. The melody of the zither rose and fell continuously. There was movement in the silence, and it was beautiful and pleasant to listen to. It was as if wild geese were flying back and forth, flying up and down, gathering and flying again. All kinds of scenes were vivid in people's eyes. Yang Fan had been to the great desert of the western region. Suddenly hearing the sound of the zither, his heart sensed it, and after listening for a moment, he closed his eyes. The sound of the zither started, like the swan geese arriving. Extremely faintly discernible among the clouds, the wild geese were flying in harmony with their cries, faintly discernible, coming and going. Then, like a flock of geese about to land, they circled in the sky, and then quietly flew around the continent 3 times, flying and eating, getting what they wanted. This song, "Wild Geese Falling on the Sand," was played by Miss Ningku since she was a child. She didn't need to look at the strings at all. Her eyes were fixed on Yang Fan. When she saw Yang Fan close his eyes, Miss Ningku raised her eyebrows slightly. Yang Fan was sitting there. He didn't shake his head to reflect on the aftertaste. nor did he gently clap the zither. It was as if he was a bosom friend. He just sat there, but his mind seemed to have drifted to a very far place. He slightly frowned and then slowly relaxed. He listened to the zither, but completely forgot about the zither. Instead, he was fully immersed in the artistic conception created by the sound of the zither, and his eyes became more like a bosom friend. The autumn air was cool, the wind was calm, the sand was flat, the clouds were thousands of miles away, and the birds were singing in the sky. Young people are ambitious, but who can understand the heart of vicissitudes? The sound of the zither lingered in the air. At the end of the clear autumn, wild geese disappeared in the sky, and only the vast desert, the clear blue sky, and the same color could be seen. Yang Fan breathed a sigh of relief, slowly opened his eyes, and gently clapped his hands, saying, "This is the most beautiful zither sound I have ever heard in my life." Ning Ku was panting after playing the song. The boat girl handed her a wet towel. She gently pressed it on her forehead, and then said with a smile, "Erling, you flatter me. It seems that you are also an expert in this field. Can you play a song for Ning Ku to hear the good news?" Yang Fan hurriedly waved his hand and said, "I dare not make a fool of myself. I dare not make a fool of myself. I only learned zither for a few days when I was a child, and then—" Speaking of this, Yang Fan seemed to think of something, and his face became slightly gloomy. Duguyu and Ning Ku looked at each other in surprise. Yang Fan came to his senses and said, "I'm sorry, I suddenly thought of my late father. When I was a child, my family was in a difficult situation, but there was a zither at home at that time. My father always taught me how to play the zither, chess, calligraphy and painting, poetry and songs. Zither was also a compulsory subject for me. Later, because I was too naughty, I accidentally fell down while climbing a tree and broke my leg. In order to buy medicine, my father sold that zither." Speaking of this, Yang Fan's eyes were faintly filled with tears. Duguyu was solemn, and Ning Ku softly persuaded, "Erling, you have such achievements today, and you have not let down Uncle's painstaking teachings. Uncle will also be happy in the underworld." Yang Fan raised his sleeves and gently wiped the corners of his eyes and bowed to her to thank her. But he was sad and couldn't say anything for a moment. At this time, a maidservant in Siam came slowly to Ning Ku with a small porcelain bowl in her hands. The boat lady bent down and reminded her, "Miss, it's time to take the medicine." Ning Ku nodded and asked the maidservant to bring the bowl to him, and then he sipped the medicine soup. Duguyu took the opportunity to change the topic and talked with Yang Fan about other things. After a while of talking and laughing, he finally got rid of the sadness caused by thinking of his late father. After Ning Ku took the medicine, the maidservant took the empty bowl and quietly left. Yang Fan couldn't help saying, "All the medicine is bitter. Although I am an adult, I still feel unbearable pain when I am occasionally sick and have to take the medicine. But just now I saw that you were willing to take it. Your endurance is really amazing." Ning Ku took out a handkerchief and gently touched the corner of his mouth and said with a tranquil smile, "It's not endurance. I'm just used to it." Used to it? How much bitterness was hidden in this simple sentence. Seeing Yang Fan showing sympathy and pity, Ning Ku said with a smile, "I heard from my mother that I was fed a small spoonful of coptis when I was born. She said it could get rid of fetal toxins. She also said that newborn babies haven't tasted all kinds of things in the human world. At that time, it was easy for them to endure some hardships, and then they would be able to endure more hardships in the future. Hee, for me, maybe it's for today." Duguyu wanted to say, "I was born on the same year, the same month, and the same day as you, and I also ate coptis. Why can't I endure hardships now?" When the words were on the tip of his tongue, he thought of the pain his little sister had suffered for many years, and his heart ached. He couldn't say this joke to lighten the atmosphere. It was a custom passed down from ancient times that newborn babies should be fed a mouthful of coptis. It was probably nonsense to say that it could get rid of fetal toxins, but this was the tradition, and future generations naturally followed it. Yang Fan didn't know whether he ate coptis when he was born or not. His parents didn't tell him about it, but after hearing Ning Ke's words, he also felt endless bitterness in his heart. He looked up and saw many ripe pears on the branches, which were yellow and bent. Yang Fan said, "Medicine is always bitter. I'll pick a pear to moisten Miss Ning Ke's throat." The pears on the tree could be reached as long as one stood up. But Yang Fan just wanted to make Miss Ning Ke laugh. So how could he do that? He slapped the ground with both hands, and his whole body soared into the air. When he was more than a person's height, he used his waist strength to jump straight to the top of the big pear tree. He stretched out his hand and grabbed a pear. His toes bounced on the branches, and he did a somersault in the air, landing in front of Miss Ning Ke. Although this movement skill was brilliant, Miss Ning Ke wasn't a martial artist, so she wasn't very interested in it. Besides, there were many martial arts masters in the Duga family, and Miss Ning Ke had seen similar lightness kung fu before. But Yang Fan took advantage of the momentum to step on the tree trunk, and many ripe pears fell. Yang Fan and Duguyu's table was under the pear tree. Pears fell one after another like hail, and 2 pears hit Duguyu's head. Duguyu cried out and hurriedly covered his head. Seeing this, Ning Ke couldn't help laughing. Her laughter was as innocent as a child's, but it was clear and slightly hoarse. Because it was rare for her to laugh out loud, she couldn't help coughing a few times. Her little face was flushed, but she couldn't hide the smile on her face. She had always been a gentle, virtuous, elegant, and noble young lady in front of others. But she was a strong woman who endured loneliness and illness alone when no one was around. But at this moment, she was just a happy girl who loved to laugh. Pear's hit on the head was very painful. Duguyu rubbed his head and was about to say a few words with a bitter face. Suddenly, he saw his sister's bright smile, and a kind of emotion welled up in his heart. He hadn't seen his twin sister smile so happily for a long time. If he could make her so happy often, he wouldn't care even if 2 iron lumps fell on his head. Chapter 589. A clear stream flowed into the Gongsun Manor from the waterway, meandering through the back garden and exiting from the other side of the garden wall. The part that flowed through the Gongsun Manor's garden converged into a man-made pond that was so clear that one could see the bottom. In the pond, a school of fish swam back and forth, advancing and retreating together. Whether it was advancing, retreating, or turning, they were always so uniform like a well-trained army. Feng Yuanyi squatted by the stream and picked the most ripe, plump, and lustrous jujubes, pears, grapes, apples, and other fruits from a large wooden basin. He happily washed them in the stream before putting them into another clean wooden basin. Autumn was the season when all kinds of fruits were the most abundant. Aunt Pei said that pregnant women should eat more fruits so that the children they gave birth to would be fresh and beautiful. Thus, Feng Yuanyi was duty-bound to snatch this job. He felt very happy. Although he was the son of a provincial governor and had been a young master since he was a child, he was no different from heaven to him after that painful experience. He could feel Yang Fan's concern for him and Sister Buchi's love for him. As long as he had something to do, he felt that he was not an idle person. Moreover, he really wanted to do something for his benefactor, even if these things were insignificant to others. After washing the fruits, Feng Yuanyi picked up the wooden basin and happily walked back to the courtyard. When he reached the courtyard, he saw 2 maidservants of the Gongsun mansion sitting on a long board by the railing, chatting while eating melon seeds. The 2 girls didn't see Feng Yuanyi, but the content of their conversation was precisely Feng Yuanyi. "What's his name?" "Feng Yuanyi." Hearing his name, Feng Yuanyi stopped in his tracks. "I heard that he's the son of a high-ranking official?" "Yes. I heard that he's a provincial governor, and it's a hereditary one at that. He's the local emperor of Lingnan." "Oh, that's really pitiful. He was castrated at such a young age." "Yes, a castrated person, bringing shame to his ancestors." Look at him. He's still so happy all day long, so carefree. You can't say that. Don't be fooled by that child's tall stature. I heard that he's only 10 years old. What does a kid know? Maybe he doesn't even understand what it means to change from standing to squatting. The two girls giggled. One of them said, Yang Langzhong and Madam take good care of him. It was said that after his father's case was solved, he would be sent back to Lingnan. Sigh, I don't know how he will live then. Maybe the Feng family will look down on him. In the future, when there were no outsiders around, girls dared to say anything. The two handmaidens spoke without restraint. The more Feng Yuanyi heard, the paler his face became. He did not know that the castration of his body would have such a huge impact on his dignity and everything in the future. Apart from the painful days after he was castrated while waiting for the wound to heal, he only felt that urinating was not as convenient as before. The 10-year-old child had no idea that it had ruined his life. Clang! The two girls suddenly heard a muffled sound behind them. They could not help but jump in fright. They hurriedly turned their heads and saw a large wooden basin jumping on the ground. Pears and apples were scattered all over the ground. A figure was madly running into the distance. Feng Yuanyi ran madly, letting his tears fall all over his clothes. The world was so big, he did not know where he could stay. After young Master Jiang arrived in Chang, and he moved into one of the Lu family's mansions. In Chang'an, where aristocratic families gathered in Chang, and which had now become Shenmu's nest, the safest and most secretive place was instead the most conspicuous. He could only keep the secret that he was in Chang, and by staying in the Lu family's residence. Lu Taigong and young Master Jiang's second brother, Lu Binji, had already left Chang'an. Lu Taigong had lost face at the hands of Yang Fan. Moreover, he had already sworn in the name of his ancestors that he would no longer participate in the fight for the vacant position in the southern border. There was no use in staying in Chang, and so he wanted to leave immediately. He could not even wait to see his most valued eldest grandson. Lu Binji had caused a great disaster. He also knew the impact this matter would have on the entire family. He had long been silent out of fear of being punished. When the old grandfather wanted to leave, he did not even dare to fart before leaving. He did not dare to say a single word. As for the other members of the Lu family, they were scattered all over the world. Among them, the majority were in Luoyang and Chang. In Chang, and the people who had received orders from the clan master were already hurriedly preparing to evacuate. Everywhere in the Lu family's mansions and manors, there was chaos. This time, it was not a short departure. It had been 3 years. Of course, there were many things that needed to be moved. However, ever since young Master Jiang moved in, it was as if a ladle of cold water had been poured into a pot of boiling water. It immediately regained its calmness, even though this calmness was only temporary and superficial. No one dared to cause a scene in front of this young master. It was as if their country had been destroyed and their homes had been destroyed. The walls and corridors of a house were covered with ivy. However, because it was already autumn, the ivy was no longer green. Instead, it had turned into a patch of fiery red. Therefore, the house looked as if it was on fire, and it was bright red. A man dressed in green walked to a house covered in ivy. Climbing up the stone steps, there was a wooden corridor. The man in black stood in the corridor and said respectfully, "Yuan Tingyun requests to see the young master." "Come in." The man in black took off his boots and put them aside. He gently opened the door and walked in wearing a pair of cloth socks. Young Master Jiang was sitting behind a low table looking at something. Behind him was a window, and outside the window was a dense shade. Lu Boyan's white beard fluttered as he sat upright in the corner. Yuan Tingyun only glanced at him and quickly lowered his head. He walked to the opposite of young Master Jiang and knelt down. He bowed his head and said, "Young master." Young Master Jiang raised his eyes and looked at him coldly. He said, "You were in charge of the assassination of Yang Fan." Yuan Tingyun's face paled. He lowered his head and said yes. Second young master said that Yang Fan was the eldest young master's enemy, and he wanted to avenge the eldest young master, so... Young Master Jiang lightly snorted. He said, "So, you ruined my Lu family's important matter?" This light snort was no less than a clap of thunder in Yuan Tingyun's ears. His body trembled, and he touched his forehead to the ground, not daring to raise his head. The eldest young master was the master, and the second young master was naturally the master as well. How could he not follow the master's orders? Although it was not his idea, since it had failed, there was nothing he could do if the master wanted to vent his anger on him. Arguing that this idea was not his idea and that he had no choice but to follow orders was meaningless. Therefore, Yuan Tingyun did not argue and only waited for the eldest young master's decision. However, young Master Jiang was silent for a while and did not say anything to have him commit suicide. He only said, "The matter failed and we were counterattacked by him. He forced all the descendants of my Lu family to retreat to Fanyang and not leave for 3 years. Although the losses were not serious, this was a complete loss of face." Yuan Tingyun lay on the ground, not daring to answer. Young Master Jiang said, "Kill Yang Fan." Yuan Tingyun was startled and abruptly raised his head. Young Master Jiang said, Yang Fan also knew that it was impossible for all the descendants of the Lu family to return to Fanyang, so he specifically forced great-grandfather to swear 3 deadly oaths. Within 3 years, if any descendants of the Lu family do not return to Fanyang and intend to harm him, the 2 sides will fight. Life and death will be up to the heavens. When the Lu family returns, they will not make an enemy of him. Haha. He thinks that without the support of my family, he can rely on his martial arts and position to deal with me. Arrogant. Bin's order for you to kill him may be a mistake. But if it is a mistake, then you can only continue to be wrong. Only his death can wash away the shame of my Lu family. Yuan Tingyun nodded and said yes. This subordinate obeys. Young Master Jiang lightly said, "This time you will either bring his head back or bring your own head back. There is no third choice." Yuan Tingyun clenched his teeth and nodded. Yes. At this time, the shade of the rear courtyard suddenly moved despite the absence of wind. Lu Boyan, who was sitting in the corner, suddenly raised his head. His eyes were like cold lightning as he glanced outside. However, he immediately restrained his fierce, lion-like demeanor and once again became that of an old man. He slowly lowered his head. A figure suddenly flashed out of the shade. In the first flash, it seemed as if he had drilled out of the shade. In the second flash, he had already appeared in the window. In another flash, he was kneeling at young Master Jiang's side. His face was covered with a black cloth, revealing only his eyes. He did not speak, only offering a letter to young Master Jiang with both hands. Young Master Jiang did not seem the least bit surprised by this ghost-like person. He took the letter and carefully read through it. Suddenly he began to chuckle. Yuan Tingyun looked at him in surprise. Young Master Jiang waved his hand, and the masked man cupped his hands towards him before disappearing from the rear window. Young Master Jiang said to Yuan Tingyun, "The mission is cancelled." Yuan Tingyun was stunned. However, young Master Jiang was too lazy to explain to him, so he only waved his hand. Yuan Tingyun did not dare to ask again. He only kowtowed and saluted. Then he got up and quietly withdrew. Yuan Tingyun left the room and pulled down the door. Then he heaved a long sigh of relief. Cold sweat suddenly poured down his forehead. He had endured the fear in front of the young master for a long time. Young Master Jiang opened the letter in the room and read it again. He had only read half of it when he couldn't help but burst into a mocking laughter. Lu Boyan was sitting in the corner. He hadn't said a single word since the beginning. Young Master Jiang glanced at him and asked, "Old Lu, why don't you ask me why I'm laughing?" Young Master Jiang had always been an autocrat. He didn't like other people to interfere. How could Lu Boyan not know this? However, Lu Boyan had no choice but to comply since he wanted someone else to ask. So he asked, "Young master, why are you laughing?" Young Master Jiang waved the letter and said, "That old man Li Mubai thinks highly of Yang Fan. The Dugu family also wants to make friends with him. When I first saw him in Luoyang, I also thought that he was a piece of unpolished jade. I even thought of cultivating him. Unfortunately, I observed him for a while, so I let it go. I didn't think that Li Mubai and Dugu you would have the same thoughts as me." Young Master Jiang slapped the letter on the table. "I can't kill him if that's the case." Young Master Jiang proudly said, "You think highly of him. So, I'll defeat him in front of you. I'll let you know that you've misjudged him. I'll let you know that he's worthless." Lu Boyan's white eyebrows slightly wrinkled. He wanted to remind the young master, "Shinmu was also discovered by that old man Li Mubai. You didn't think much of him at first. In the end, however, he knew that the young master wouldn't listen to other people's words. Therefore, those two white eyebrows were like two clouds in the sky. They came into contact with each other, and then suddenly separated. Young Master Jiang raised his chin. He looked like a proud peacock. If his second brother hadn't been rushing back to Fanyang, then he would have asked someone to draw his eldest brother's appearance at this moment. He would have mounted it on his fan. That way, it would have completely replaced that big-tailed bird with its tail spread out. Chapter 590. Yang Fan was sent back to the Gongsun mansion by a carriage sent by the Dugu family. After entering the mansion, he walked towards the back courtyard where he and Xiao Man lived. As soon as he passed through the moon gate, a figure rushed towards him. Yang Fan suddenly condensed his strength in his palms. He immediately recognized that the person was Feng Yuanyi and quickly withdrew his strength. Feng Yuanyi was too ashamed to show his face after hearing what the two maids said. For a moment, he didn't want to see anyone and didn't dare to see anyone. Right now, he just wanted to escape from everyone who knew him and knew that he was a eunuch. Feng Yuanyi was running out of the mansion with tears streaming down his face when he suddenly saw Yang Fan. Afraid that he would bump into him, he quickly turned around. But because he was running too fast, Feng Yuanyi couldn't stand still, and his body spun and fell into the flowers. Just as his body tilted, his arm was firmly grasped by a strong hand. Yang Fan was surprised and said, "Yuanyi, what's wrong?" "You. Who bullied you?" "Brother Yang, let me go. I don't want to stay here." Feng Yuanyi was sobbing and struggling with all his might. Yang Fan frowned and said, "Come here and tell me what happened." Yang Fan didn't allow Feng Yuanyi to speak. He pulled Feng Yuanyi into a gazebo in the woods, pressed him down on a seat, and sat down beside him. He stared at him and said, "Tell me what happened." Feng Yuanyi only shook his head in tears. His eyes were lowered, and he didn't dare to meet his eyes. He pursed his lips and didn't say a word. At this time, Anu and Gong Sunlanji also hurried over with the two maids who had caused trouble. After bringing Feng Yuanyi back to the mansion, Yang Fan naturally didn't hide his identity and experience from Xiao Man and Anu. Anu didn't tell anyone about it. Xiao Man was going to be a mother soon, so she was especially soft-hearted and loved Feng Yuanyi very much. However, she had told her senior sister about Feng Yuanyi's background and identity. Xiao Man and Gong Sunlanji were martial sisters, and they were as close as real sisters. To be precise, the Gongsun clan and Gong Sunlanji were her benefactors. Now, not only was her family living here, but Feng Yuanyi was also going to live here. It was only right for her to tell the owner of this place about Feng Yuanyi. Moreover, Xiao Man also wanted to use this to arouse senior sisters' sympathy for Feng Yuanyi. Although Gong Sunlanji has a carefree temperament, she has a very good heart. After listening to the details, she really sympathized with Feng Yuanyi. She also specially instructed the servants and maids working in the guest house to take good care of this little fellow Feng Yuanyi. No one was allowed to bully him, and no one was allowed to order this child to do any dirty or tiring work. The problem was that Gong Sun Lanji didn't think it was a big secret that Feng Yuanyi was a eunuch. In order to arouse the sympathy of these servants and maids, she also told them about this matter. Because of this, the servants and maids working in the guest house really took special care of Feng Yuanyi and sympathized with him. But when people talked and sighed behind his back, it was inevitable that they would say whatever they thought. Anyway, Feng Yuanyi wasn't around, so they didn't think about taking care of his feelings. As a result, their discussion was heard by Feng Yuanyi. Feng Yuanyi left in tears. The two maids knew that they had caused trouble and hurriedly went to report to their Mississippi, Gong Sun Lanji. Anu and Xiaoman were talking and chatting together. They were shocked when they heard the news. Xiaoman had a big belly and couldn't move easily, so Anu and Gong Sun Lanji quickly chased after her. Feng Yuanyi was crying, and when he saw a large group of people surrounding him, he felt even more embarrassed. He simply covered his face, and only tears flowed out from the gaps between his fingers. He even refused to let others see his face. Seeing that Anu and the others had chased after him, Yang Fan gave Anu a puzzled look. Anu pursed her lips and gestured to him. Yang Fan patted Feng Yuanyi's shoulder to reassure him, then got up and walked over. Anu sighed and told him what had happened in a low voice. Only then did Yang Fan understand. Gong Sun Lanji's pretty face was red, and she said embarrassedly, "This time it's my fault." Yang Fan shook his head, then turned and walked to Feng Yuanyi's side and sat down. After a moment of deliberation, he slowly said, "Yuanyi being framed by cruel officials and suffering misfortune is not your fault. There are some things that can't be changed, but how you walk the path in the future is up to you." He put his arm around Feng Yuanyi's shoulder and said softly, "Think about it. When you used a stone knife to assassinate the imperial envoy, how brave was that? How bold was that? Who dares to say that you're not a real man? Qin Fuyang is a famous warrior in history, but he only dared to kill someone when he was only 13 years old, and the person he killed was a ruffian. To put it bluntly, it was just a street fight between two ruffians. What you did was 100 times more brilliant than what he did. If this isn't a real man, then who is?" Feng Yuanyi's crying became softer when he heard that. He was only a 10-year-old child, and it was Yang Fan who helped him when he was most helpless. So he was especially willing to listen to Yang Fan's words. Gong Sun Lanji felt very guilty. Seeing this, she also came forward to persuade him. "Yuanyi, what do you think is a man? What kind of man brings honor to his ancestors and does not bring shame to his ancestors? Benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom and trust, loyalty, filial piety, compassion, forgiveness, courage and tolerance. Any one of these can make a man of indomitable spirit." Anu said, "What Brother Yang and Sister Lanji said to you is the truth of life. The standard to measure a person is these noble virtues, and what great things he has done in his life that others can't do. You can't change what has happened, but what kind of future you have, it's up to you. Brother Yuanyi, do as Brother Yang and Sister Lanji said, and you can also become a famous person in history, a real man, a real man." Feng Yuanyi slowly put down his hands. Through his blurred eyes he saw their sincere and concerned gazes, which made his extremely sensitive but also in urgent need of care feel a sense of warmth. Seeing that his attitude had warmed up, Yang Fan gave Gong Sun Lanji and Anu a look, signaling them to leave for the time being. Then he said to Feng Yuanyi, "Brother Yang won't say anything now. He's only here to accompany you. Think about what Brother Yang and the two sisters said to you, and think about the truth of life." Anu pulled Gong Sun Lanji, turned around, and was about to leave, but after 2 steps she hesitated for a moment, stopped and said to Feng Yuanyi, "Sister Xiaoman was very worried when she heard that you ran away. She's pregnant, so she can't catch up with you. I'll go back and tell her first, so she won't worry. Sister Anu and Sister Xiaoman will wait for you to come back and have dinner together." Feng Yuanyi stared blankly at Anu and Gong Sun Lanji, leaving with the two little servant girls who caused trouble. The two elder servant girls looked back at him as they walked, their faces full of guilt. Wenan Nu and the others walked far away. Feng Yuanyi slowly lowered his head, pondered for a long time, then raised his head, looked at Yang Fan expectantly and said, "Benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom and trust, loyalty, filial piety, chastity, forgiving, courage, and letting go. Teacher once said these words to me. Brother Yang, do you think if you can do these you must be a real man? Yang Fan rubbed his head and answered affirmatively, "That's right." Taisher Gong studied the relationship between heaven and man, understood the changes of the past and the present, and became a family of words. When the people of the later generations mention him, whether they are scholars or common people, who doesn't revere and respect him? Who cares that he has been subjected to castration? Whether a man is a real man or not depends on his character and his actions, not his appearance. Yes. Feng Yuanyi nodded hard, and his eyes gradually lit up. At this moment, a member of the Gong Sun Manor walked over from a small path and inadvertently glanced at the small pavilion in the forest. He stopped in his tracks and hurriedly passed through the thicket to the front of the small pavilion. Standing with his hands by his side, he said, "So Physician Yang is here. This lowly one has just received an invitation for Physician Yang to attend a banquet." After saying that, the family member presented an invitation, and then looked at Feng Yuanyi in surprise, whose face was full of tears. Yang Fan took the invitation and opened it. It was an invitation that Lin Zixiong had written for Li Mubai. Grand Duke Li's birthday. Yang Fan went back with the invitation and specially inquired from Gong Sun Bufan. Only then did he know that Grand Duke Li's real identity was the clan master of the Longxi Li family. Gong Sun Bufan naturally had to go to Li Mubai's birthday, but he didn't know that even Yang Fan had a part in it. He didn't expect that Yang Fan would have an invitation, which really shocked him. With Grand Duke Li's status, there were very few people who could get an invitation to his birthday. Most people knew that Grand Duke Li was going to celebrate his birthday, so they would rush to send gifts and congratulate him. If they could enter the Li family's door and drink a cup of wine, it would be a great honor and capital. You want to wait for the Li family to send you an invitation? That's impossible. But it just so happened that Yang Fan had an invitation. According to reason, with Grand Duke Li's status, only officials at the Prime Minister level were qualified to get an invitation from the Li Mansion. If Yang Fan, a fifth-grade minister of Ministry of Justice, took the initiative to come to the Li Mansion to congratulate him, it was hard to say whether he could get a cup of wine or not. Gong Sun Bufan really couldn't figure out why he, the adopted son-in-law, was so valued by the Li family. On the day of the Li family's birthday banquet, Yang Fan shocked Gong Sun Bufan once again. The birthday gift that Yang Fan brought was actually a birthday cake and a pair of birthday candles. The gift was tied up neatly, and there was a longevity character cut out of red paper on it. Holding it in his hand, he shook it in a festive manner. Gong Sun Bufan turned pale with fright. This was just the most common birthday gift among the common people. Not to mention that today's birthday star was Grand Duke Li, the head of Longxi's Li clan. Even if it was someone else, it would be too shabby for a minister of Ministry of Justice like Yang Fan to give such a birthday gift. Gong Sun Bufan hurriedly said, "Erling's home is in Luoyang, and he just came back from the south on business. I think he didn't have the time to prepare a generous birthday gift in such a hurry. This is my nephew's fault. If you're short of money, you can tell Uncle about it. I'll ask my family to prepare another one for you." Yang Fan interrupted him and said with a smile, "You don't have to be so polite, Uncle. This is the gift I prepared for Grand Duke Li. Grand Duke Li has seen all kinds of rare treasures. Even if I prepare it carefully, I think it won't be able to enter his eyes." Gong Sun Bufan said awkwardly, "But your birthday gift is a little too simple." Yang Fan said with a smile, It's hard to attract people's attention, no matter how generous the gift I prepared is. Why don't I bring a simple birthday gift? In this way, I'll be the center of attention. How glorious will that be? Haha, Uncle, you don't have to worry about me. Let's go. Yang Fan pulled Gong Sun Bufan and left without saying anything. Gong Sun Bufan smiled bitterly and thought, I have to separate from him as soon as I reach the Li family. We can't be together. I, Gong Sun Bufan, want to be strong all my life. I really can't afford to lose my face. Chapter 591. On Li Mubai's birthday, even the imperial court specially sent a middle-ranking official to Chang, and with gifts from the emperor to congratulate him. Although Wu Zetian used all kinds of means to suppress the aristocratic families, she still needed to save face. Many officials of the imperial court in the capital also sent their sons and nephews to the Li mansion in Chang, and with generous gifts. As for the aristocratic families and officials in Chang, and it was needless to say, today's day was undoubtedly a grand gathering for the descendants of the aristocratic families to socialize. For those who were much lower in status than them, it was also a rare opportunity to get to know them. Therefore, as long as they could come, they would all come. The fact that they could come meant that they were of high social status. Only at this kind of time and in this kind of family would such a strange scene occur. Because the officialdom of the southern border was about to undergo a great purge, there would be a large number of vacant official positions. Those who wanted to find an official position for their sons and nephews would all rush to Chang, and like sharks smelling blood. Among this group of sharks, the most powerful were the aristocratic families. Li Mubai's birthday party became a meeting for these bigwigs to divide the spoils. It should be known that these bigwigs were all influential heroes. If not for such a good opportunity, they could only hold a large-scale gathering secretly. Otherwise, once the emperor found out, he would not be able to sleep well. However, with their status and extravagance, even if they were to travel incognito, they would still be escorted by numerous guards in the open and in the dark. It would be fine if one or two of them met, but if so many important people were to gather together, only a blind person would not be able to see it. With such a good opportunity, they could gather openly and no one would be able to question them. At the gate of the Li mansion, the old steward and a few stewards dressed in fresh and clean cyan robes welcomed the guests with a smile. After receiving the name card, there would be someone leading the servants to hand the gifts to the gatehouse for registration. If an important person came, the steward would announce the name. Li Taigong's sons and grandsons were waiting inside. After hearing the name card, they would come out to greet them according to their corresponding status and seniority. Gong Sun Bufan and Yang Fan rode in 2 ox carts and arrived at the gate of the Li mansion with a creaking sound. Ox carts were a relatively slow means of transportation. Not only people who traveled long distances would not use such slow ox carts, but even in the city, few people would take ox carts. But this was only limited to officials and ordinary people. Aristocratic families were not included. Ox carts were the favorite means of transportation of aristocratic families during the Han and Jin dynasties. Because ox carts were spacious and stable, riding them could fully display the graceful demeanor of aristocratic families. So even though few people took ox carts in Luoyang nowadays, ox carts were still common in Chang, and the ancient capital of thousands of years. Of course, as long as they saw people traveling in ox carts, they would know that it must be an aristocratic family with a long history. As soon as the head steward saw the 2 ox carts, he knew that they must be from an aristocratic family. He immediately welcomed them with a smile, and at the same time signaled the deputy steward to prepare to call out the names. Gong Sun Bufan got off the carriage, and the steward who accompanied him immediately handed over the greeting card on his behalf. A few servants in green clothes carried many congratulatory gifts tied with red silk and pasted with the character longevity on them from the back of the carriage. Li Taigong's eldest grandson heard this and quickly came out to greet Gong Sun Bufan. As soon as he saw Gong Sun Bufan, he cupped his hands and greeted Gong Sun Bufan with a smile. Then he went inside to let the guest in. The steward's eyes were sharp. He saw that Gongsun Bufan was sitting in the first cart, and the gifts were also placed in the first cart. Seeing that there was no movement from the cart behind, the steward smiled and said, "Are the guests in the cart behind also from Gongsun family?" Gongsun Bufan glanced at the back and hurriedly pretended that he didn't know them. He shook his head and turned to Li Taigong's eldest grandson. He said with a smile, "I'm here to congratulate Old Master on his 88th birthday. Please lead the way. I want to pay my respects to Old Master in person." Gongsun Bufan glanced at the back and hurriedly pretended that he didn't know them. He shook his head and turned to Li Taigong's eldest grandson. He said with a smile, "I'm here to congratulate Old Master on his 88th birthday. Please lead the way. I want to pay my respects to Old Master in person." "Ha ha ha. Brother Gongsun, please. Brother Li, please." Gongsun Bufan was even more anxious than the host. He hurriedly entered the Li family's gate. At this time, Yong Fan just got off the cart. He didn't have any servants to help him, so he didn't need anyone to help him with the gifts. He carried them and walked over leisurely, nodding to the white-haired old steward with a smile. The old steward didn't dare to be negligent. Which family steward was this old steward from? The Longxi Li clan. He was the steward of the Li clan lord and had served Old Master since he was young. He had seen all kinds of people and experienced all kinds of situations. He didn't dare to treat this young master lightly when he saw that he was dressed in simple clothes and had a calm demeanor. He didn't dare to treat him lightly. He looked at this young master again and saw that he didn't have anything on him except for a small bag about a foot long. It was so light that it didn't weigh much. His face was even more affectionate, and the wrinkles on his face were like blooming autumn chrysanthemums. According to the old man's experience, the smaller the gift, the more precious it was. His old master loved to collect rare things. If this young man's birthday gift was some rare antique or unique item, his old master would definitely be happy. The old steward went forward and didn't let the stewards do anything. He personally took the gift from Yong Fan's hand. When he looked down, his smile froze. A pair of longevity candles appeared in front of his eyes, although there was a paper bag underneath. Since there was a pair of longevity candles on the top, how precious could the gift underneath be? The old steward still couldn't believe it. He secretly squeezed the paper bag. It was broken. The feeling from his hand was that it was clearly a bag of snacks. The old steward's face twitched violently. He raised his head and looked at Yong Fan in disbelief. When Yong Fan was about to say something auspicious, he suddenly found that the old man's face was a little strange. He couldn't help asking curiously, "Old man, what's wrong?" The old steward seemed to have run around Chong and city 3 times before he came back. He took a few deep breaths and swallowed the malicious words that had rushed to the tip of his tongue. He forced a smile and said, "Young master, do you have an invitation?" There were only 2 kinds of guests today, those with invitation and those without. Basically, the number of people who had an invitation could be counted on one hand. Only the leading figures of the major families had an invitation. Most of these people were white-haired old men. The rest of them had all come uninvited. Even the magistrate of Chang and local government, Lu Chechen, came with an invitation himself. The old steward was sure that this young man couldn't have an invitation in any case. However, the old steward had served Old Master Li all his life and had developed the habit of being cautious. So he still asked, if this young man didn't have an invitation, he would drive him away without any hesitation. How could he come to the Li family with a pair of longevity candles and a bag of longevity cakes? Was he here to congratulate or to humiliate? Wasn't this just a trick played by those ruffians in Chang and city who wanted to borrow money for a living? Someone had eyes but failed to see and came to the Li family. "Hey, if I don't beat you up, you won't know why the flowers are so red." The old steward swore in his heart. He secretly gathered his dantian chi and waited for Yang Fan to say no invitation. Then he shouted, "Come on, beat this bastard out of here." As a result, the young man, who had two beautiful dimples on his cheeks when he smiled, let out a soft cry, as if he had just remembered something. He hurriedly took out an invitation from his bosom and politely handed it to him. The old steward took the invitation and glanced at Yang Fan. He opened the invitation and made a sound as if he had a toothache. Then he glanced at Yang Fan and opened his eyes wide. He held the invitation and looked at it over and over again. He said, "There's no mistake. It's an invitation from the Li family. Honorable guest, please come in." The old steward was cautious after all. He said with a fake smile. Seeing Yang Fan swaggering into the mansion, he immediately beckoned two stewards over and ordered in a low voice, "You go and keep an eye on him." Then he said to the other steward, "Go and ask Lin Zixiong if this person is really our guest. Hey, if someone comes to our Li clan to swindle people and get free food and drinks, we will lose a lot of face if it gets out." Yes. The two stewards left in a hurry. The old steward looked at the bag of snacks and candles in his hand. He pursed his lips and casually threw them into a trash basket next to the mansion's door. He turned around and stood at the door again with a humble smile on his face in a quiet room. The wooden floor glowed with a clear oil luster. The whole room was spotless. It didn't seem to have any magnificent or luxurious furnishings, but the screen, table, and utensils all exuded a simple and unadorned aura. Everything in this room was very old. The oldest was the bronze wares from the Shang dynasty. All the treasures of the dynasty were gathered in one room. Those who didn't know what was good and unadorned might feel that the furnishings in this room didn't match the identity of the master of the Longxi Li family. But those who knew what was good and unadorned would find that the incense burner was from the Qin dynasty. The table in front of him was from the Han dynasty. The futon under his butt and the big jar next to the table were from the Jin dynasty. Maybe the futon was where Ji Kong used to sit, and the jar used to be Lu Ling's wine vessel. All the things in the room, big or small, were unique and priceless treasures. On the small table on the green jade table of the Han dynasty, there was a zither. The zither was 1 meter, 2 feet, and 3 inches long. The surface of the zither was 1 meter, 1 foot, and 2 inches long. The surface of the zither was slightly peeled. It could be seen that the paint was divided into 3 layers. The bottom layer was made of thin antler gray, the middle layer was made of hard black paint, and the surface layer was made of thin, chestnut-colored paint. There was a small, broken snake belly, a purple jade emblem, and a rectangular dragon pond and phoenix pond on the forehead. The back of the zither was engraved with the seal script green damask, and the 4 characters Sima Changqing were engraved on the bottom of the pond. Li Mubai, who had his 88th birthday today, pretended to walk back and forth in the room with his hands behind his back. From time to time, he peeped at Ning, who was sitting cross-legged in front of the table, and tried to suppress his complacency. Ning was dressed in snow-white clothes. She was as beautiful as a cloud covering the bright moon or a lotus coming out of the water. Her eyes were focused on the zither. From the back of the zither to the dragon pond and phoenix pond, she could see the wood of the inner belly of the zither. The wood was old, golden, and a little soft. There were some fingerprints left by people of different ages on the zither. There was an obvious depression at the end of the phoenix pond. The texture was delicate and the paint was pure. A ray of sunlight shone on the surface of the zither. You could see the glittering antler frost and gold, silver, copper, and other powders in the paint. Ning slightly closed her eyes and gently plucked the strings with her fingers. The sound of the zither was gentle and peaceful. Ning took a deep breath and opened her eyes. She said happily, "It is indeed Sima Xiangru's green damask." "Ha!" Li Mubai smiled proudly and immediately stopped smiling. He pretended to be profound and said, "If it is a fake, how can it hide from my eyes? Ha! I have collected all my life." Only this zither and the purple bamboo flute of Prime Minister Chin Han Fei are my favorite. Ning Ku said sweetly. Among the musical instruments, zither and bamboo flute are both gentlemen who are aloof from the world. Other musical instruments are for appreciating the sound, but bamboo flute and zither are for listening to the rhyme. They are the best objects for nostalgia and meditation. Bosom friend, bosom friend. Li Mubai was very excited. This is my bosom friend. Unlike my stupid children and grandchildren who only know how to flatter me. None of them can say the true meaning of zither. Ning made a face at him and said mischievously, since we are bosom friends, how about lending this zither to Ku for a few days? No, no. Li Mubai's face changed. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, if I lend this zither to you, it is like Liu Bei lending Jingzhou. It will be difficult for me to see it again. Ha ha! I said that I will play with it for a year and give it to you as a birthday gift next year. You little girl, can't you wait for such a little time? As soon as he finished speaking, Lin Zixiong called outside the door, Great-grandfather. Li Mubai said, come in. When Lin Zixiong opened the door and came in, Li Mubai said, what's wrong? Is it the right time? Lin Zixiong said, it's not the right time. But just now the old steward sent someone to ask me if I invited Yang Longzhong of the Ministry of Justice as a guest on behalf of great-grandfather. Li Mubai said, this old guy is really muddle-headed. All my guests have invitations. If they have invitations, they're invited by me. Does he need to specially send someone to ask? Ning was fiddling with the green damask with a look of fondness. Suddenly hearing the name of Yang Fan, she couldn't help raising her head. With a strange look on his face, Lin Zixiong said, yes, it's just because Yang Longzhong's birthday gift is too shabby, so the old steward suspects that he is a ruffian who unintentionally picked up the invitation to eat and drink. Li Mubai was startled and asked curiously, what birthday gift did Yang Fan give me? Lin Zixiong laughed dryly and said, a pair of longevity candles and a box of longevity cakes. Li Mubai was stunned at first. Then he looked up to the sky and laughed. Ha ha ha! This young man is really interesting. I have celebrated my 88th birthday since I was 1 year old. This is the first time I have received such a birthday gift as longevity candles and longevity cakes. Ha ha ha! Lin Zixiong laughed dryly and said, the old steward suspects that he is a swindler and has sent someone to keep an eye on him. Li Mubai's childishness was aroused, and he said to Ning Ku, girl, do you want to go and see the ruffian who came to my mansion to cheat food and drink? Ning Ku covered her mouth and laughed. Great-grandfather is the birthday boy today. When he goes out, he doesn't even wear his birthday robe. It will shock the whole mansion. Li Mubai waved his hand and said, hey, Yang Fan was a junior, so he was naturally in the middle hall or the front hall. Those old guys were all in the backyard. How many of the guests outside could recognize this old man? Let Zixiong lead the way, so that people in the mansion don't make a fuss. Hearing Li Mubai's words, Ning Ku also became interested and said excitedly, okay, then I will accompany you to see the little ruffian who cheats food and drink. Chapter 592. The old master of the Li clan of Longxi wanted to hold a birthday banquet. Those who came were either high-ranking officials or noble families. Which one of them was short of money? Naturally, it was impossible for them to hold a banquet like other ordinary families, with lavish meals for their guests. The purpose of the people who came to the banquet was not this. In addition to expressing goodwill to the Li family, the main purpose of these people who came to the banquet was to use this opportunity to get to know more people in the upper class. Knowing more people meant more connections, and this was something that money could not buy. Therefore, the entire front hall and the middle hall, including the 2 courtyards, did not have tables and tables of banquets. There were only a few tables placed in unobstructed places with some wine, fruits, dairy products, and cold dishes. If someone was really hungry or thirsty, they could take them to fill their stomachs. Therefore, as he strolled around the hall, under the trees and among the flowers, groups of people could be seen everywhere. Some were sitting on the tables, some were standing shoulder to shoulder, and the atmosphere was elegant and refined. Yang Fan wandered around the crowd for a long time. There were many people like him who wandered around. They were all noble young masters looking for acquaintances to chat with, or officials and children of middle-class aristocratic families who were dissatisfied with their current status and wanted to curry favor with famous families. Because of their different purposes, Yang Fan's behavior was very different from these people. These people wandered around with a goal in mind. Once they found a target, they would either greet with a smile and chat, or tidy up their clothes and greet and introduce themselves. Only Yang Fan didn't know anyone and didn't want to deliberately make friends with anyone. Therefore, he looked around leisurely. This behavior was seen by the steward of the Li clan who was secretly watching him. Naturally, he felt that the old steward's eyesight was extraordinary. This kid was indeed suspicious. However, so far he hadn't seen him steal any noble young master's purse or jade pendant. He also hadn't seen him meet any naive and gullible young masters of aristocratic families to strike up a conversation. Instead, he ate a lot of fruits, snacks, and platters. Yang Fan wandered around for a while and stopped at the left side of the garden. There was a large flower garden here. All kinds of flowers were in full bloom, and their fragrance assailed the nostrils. There were relatively few guests in the garden, so it was very quiet. There was a long corridor in the midst of the flowering shrubs. The roof was covered with tiles, and every beam was painted with lush forests, tall bamboos, flowers, birds, insects, fish, mountains, rivers, clouds, and rivers. It was exceptionally gorgeous. There were 4 octagonal pavilions with heavy eaves at both ends of the corridor and in the middle. Most of them were occupied, talking and laughing. There was a lot of wine and food on the long bench closest to each pavilion. Yang Fan picked up a glass of 3 baskets of wine and walked to the side. He leaned against a colorful pillar and crossed his legs. As he sipped the wine, he looked around leisurely. Most of the people in the hallway were disciples of aristocratic families. Some of them were strangers, some were old friends, and some were new acquaintances. There were even women among them. That was because those who came to the Li mansion to celebrate his birthday were not only the aristocrats of Shandong, but also the local aristocrats of Chon. The Guanlong clan had a strong sense of propriety. It was normal for women to show their faces in public. If someone brought a woman over, and she wasn't familiar with the women of the host's family, then she wouldn't have to go to the rear residence where the woman was placed. Instead, she could casually wander around the garden and chat with others. This wasn't considered rude at the time, because there were new friends and women. The noble young masters would try to show off their manners and accomplishments in front of the disciples of other aristocratic families. As a result, they could only talk about elegance. And among the elegance, the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting, as well as poetry, were the most suitable to talk about. As Yang Fan drank, he listened to the moaning of the noble young masters in the pavilion to the side. They were like a swarm of flies buzzing around him. He felt very bored. He had only come today because he had been invited by the Li family. Otherwise, according to his plans, he wouldn't have taken the initiative to visit. Especially after chatting with Dugiyu, he already had a new idea of cooperating with the aristocratic families. He was in no hurry to take the initiative to contact these aristocratic families. However, he also knew that since the Li family remembered a minor character like him and even specially sent him an invitation, there must be a reason for it. They definitely wouldn't treat him as an ordinary congratulatory guest. Yang Fan took a sip of wine and thought to himself, "Does old grandfather Li have something to say to me? That's not right. If that was the case, he wouldn't have chosen today. He's the birthday boy today. How could he have the leisure to chat with me? In that case, he probably wants to use this banquet to introduce me to someone. Or introduce me to someone. Those who could come to the Li family were all people with a certain amount of status and power. They also had a wide network so it was impossible for them to not see a single friend. Thus, it was rare for them to be sitting alone. One of the dozen or so people sitting and chatting in the pavilion happened to turn his head and saw Yang Fan sitting alone. He couldn't help but be curious. The descendants of aristocratic families rarely wore gold and silver. They dressed up like nouveau riche. From Yang Fan's clothes, he couldn't tell who this person was. He only felt that this person was drinking leisurely and had an extraordinary bearing. So he got up and walked over. This person's surname was Wang, and he was called Wang Siyuan. He came from the Wang family of Taiyuan. Among the 7 sects and 5 families, the Wang family of Taiyuan had declined greatly since the early Tang dynasty. Of course, this decline was only relative to the other aristocratic families. A starving camel was still bigger than a horse. In the eyes of others, the Wang family of Taiyuan was still an unreachable figure. However, because of this, the descendants of the Wang family became even more low-key and lowered their attitude. They intended to make friends with some aristocratic families and use this to consolidate the Wang family's position. He saw this person sitting alone with a leisurely expression. Sitting among the many descendants of aristocratic families, he didn't have any reservations at all. He assumed that this person was a descendant of an aristocratic family and wanted to make friends with him. Wang Siyuan walked to Yang Fan's side and smiled. He cupped his hands and said, "May I ask what this brother's name is?" Yang Fan was thinking about this question and secretly analyzed Li Mubai's intentions. Suddenly, he saw that the other person was talking to him politely. He quickly got up and returned the greeting. He said, "My surname is Yang and my name is Fan. I wonder who this brother is." When Wang Siyuan heard that his surname was Yang, his heart jumped. Could it be the Hongnong Yang family? However, Yang Fan didn't report his family background. Normally, those with a county's prestige would report their family background. This wasn't because the descendants of aristocratic families liked to show off, but because it was a form of pride and respect for the family's inheritance. Yang Fan only said his name and didn't report his prestige. Wang Siyuan was a little puzzled at first. When he thought about the 2 words Yang Fan, he suddenly remembered that he had just heard this person's name. He couldn't help but cry out, "Ah, are you the Ministry of Justice's Yang Langzhong?" Yang Fan was a little surprised. He didn't expect this person to have heard of his name. He quickly said, "Yes." Ah, it's an honor to meet you at last." Wang Siyuan originally thought that Yang Fan was a son of an aristocratic family. He didn't expect that it was Yang Fan who had offended the Lu family of Fanyang. He was greatly disappointed. He said a few polite words without sincerity, then cupped his hands and bid farewell. There was nothing to say about his demeanor. However, Yang Fan already saw that this person's expression was slightly awkward. It seemed that he had misjudged him. He couldn't help but secretly laugh. When Wang Siyuan returned to the pavilion, he quietly explained Yang Fan's identity. Everyone in the pavilion began to look at Yang Fan one after another. The Lu family had all returned to Fanyang. How could these aristocratic families not know about this? Although the conflict between Lu Binji and Yang Fan was secretive, and some people wanted to cover it up, it slowly spread. Some of the core disciples of the aristocratic families already knew of this matter. Moreover, it wasn't because of a woman's jealousy, as the outside world had said. They understood the truth of the matter. Because of the Lu family's withdrawal, the various aristocratic families received even more benefits. In their hearts, they didn't reject Yang Fan. Moreover, the Lu family had suffered a small loss. They even had a kind of schadenfreude. However, this did not include the younger generation who didn't know the value of rice and daily necessities. They and Lu Binji were both sons of aristocratic families. Naturally, they had a feeling of being bound by a common enemy. Yang Fan, a son of a commoner family, had unexpectedly caused the son of the Lu family of Fanyang to be disgraced. Even old grandfather Lu had fallen for his tricks and was forced to return to Fanyang. These sons of aristocratic families felt that the Lu family's loss of face was equivalent to them losing face. They looked at Yang Fan with a somewhat unkind gaze. When Yang Fan had come, he had thought that the Li family would also treat the banquet with fish and meat, so he had come on an empty stomach. In the end, this was not the case at all. He was young and strong, and he also practiced martial arts. His appetite had always been large, and the bits and pieces of food he had eaten along the way were not enough to fill his stomach. Now he saw that among the food laid out on the long bench, there was one that had been arranged in the shape of a landscape garden villa. It looked quite pleasing, and the food on it was just right for his appetite. As for the sons of aristocratic families who were talking loudly, no one came to eat. Thus he unceremoniously brought the food over and began to calmly eat. As he ate, he continued to think. When the sons of aristocratic families saw Yang Fan's behavior, they looked at him with even more disdain. After whispering to each other, they stood and walked toward Yang Fan. "Yang Langzhong, please." They greeted Yang Fan with smiles on their faces. Yang Fan's train of thought was once again interrupted, and he slightly furrowed his brow in displeasure. They acted as if they did not see him, and one after another introduced themselves. A youth with a face full of acne cupped his hands and said, "Taiyuan Wang Siyuan." Yang Fan tried hard to swallow the extremely delicious bacon and raised his eyebrows to look at this person, thinking, "This person must be that Wang Siyuan's brother." A square-headed, well-built young man cupped his hands and said, "Xingyang Zhengyu." Another 4 handsome brothers, ranging from about 30 to 15 or 16 years old, cupped their hands together and said, "Bowling Chui Shi, Chui Qi, Chui Yi, Chui Di." When they came, their aura was somewhat unfriendly. Although their smiles and demeanor were impeccable, they were still a group of young people after all, and they were not very shrewd. Although their hostility was well hidden, with Yang Fan's experience, he could still feel it immediately. Since Yang Fan knew that these people did not have good intentions, he did not even stand up to greet them. He lazily put down the plate of garden that he had eaten earlier and said indifferently, "How is it?" The one who called himself Chui Shi said with a smile, "Today, you and I are attending Grand Duke Li's birthday banquet together, and it can be considered fate. I see that Brother Yang is sitting quietly drinking alone, unavoidably lonely. As the saying goes, having fun alone is not as good as having fun together. Why don't we use this Li Residence's garden as a topic, a scene, an object, or the scene of the birthday banquet, and recite a poem to answer? How about it?" Yang Fan was stunned at first, and then he frowned and said with a faint smile, "Can you heavens chosen be any more bored?" Chapter 593. Chui Shi said in astonishment, "Reciting poems is a matter of elegance. How can you say it's boring?" Yang Fan smiled faintly and directly exposed their intentions. Using elegant things to do inelegant things and showing off your abilities by writing poems? There's no harm in showing off your abilities, but you people have studied the classics since you were young and have been immersed in the way of poetry for a long time. You know that I, Yang Fan, can't possibly be more accomplished than you, so you want to refute me and vent Lu Binji's anger. Don't you find this kind of tactic boring? The exchange here immediately attracted the attention of a group of people sitting idly and chatting in a small pavilion. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. The people sitting in that pavilion were the scions of the Guanlong Corporation, but Dugu Yu wasn't among them. Despite his young age, Dugu Yu was the lord of a clan. Therefore, he was accompanying those old fellows in the back residence. The scions of the Guanlong aristocracy weren't unfamiliar with these scions of the Shandong landowning families, but they didn't recognize Yang Fan. Their curiosity was immediately piqued when they saw these scions of the Shandong landowning families surrounding a young man they didn't know at all. They didn't know who this person was, but he actually refused to get up from his seat despite the Shandong landowning families taking the initiative to curry favor. Thus, they all walked over. As soon as these people gathered around, the scions of the aristocratic families, sitting and chatting nearby, also followed out of curiosity. The Wei clan of Jingzhou, the Pei clan of Hudong, the Lu clan of Hudong, the Shui clan of Hudong, the Yang clan of Hongnong, the Du clan of Jingzhou, and the Shao clan of Lanling, which was originally one of the 4 major overseas Chinese surnames of the Eastern Jin and Southern dynasties, and had now integrated into the Guanlong Corporation and become an important member. In a moment, the scions of the Shandong and Guanlong aristocratic families were all gathered here. Cui Shi revealed an embarrassed expression after his intentions were exposed by Yang Fan. He forced a smile to hide his embarrassment and said, "Yang Longzhong is overthinking. We only want to recite poems and answer your questions to relieve our boredom. As for Lu Binji, the Lu family is the Lu family and we are us. Why would we stand up for someone else?" Yang Fan snickered and continued Cui Shi's words. "I, the Yang, have a great appetite for wine. I don't need boring things like poems to liven things up with wine. If you really want to answer with a poem, there are many refined people here. There's no need for me to answer." Zhang Yu was displeased and said, "How is poetry and songs considered boring?" Dozens of disciples of aristocratic families surrounded him. Yang Fan sat there carelessly, without any awareness of getting up. He just smiled and shook his head. Songjia created words to record things. Later generations evolved and created poems to express their emotions. However, words were limited, so how could they express the creation of heaven and earth? In this kind of situation, one should be complacent and forget one's words. Putting it into words is already falling behind. Isn't it boring? These disciples of aristocratic families usually had nothing to do, so they specialized in studying poems and were conceited about their attainments. They expected that it would be difficult for Yang Fan to defeat them. Now that they saw Yang Fan's clever refusal, they were even more certain that he was afraid. Cui Shi laughed. "Brother Yang's words are wrong. Poems are elegant and used to express emotions. How can you say that it is falling behind? I, Cui Shi, have once written a poem about peonies. The beauty of a country is different. There are many kinds of peonies. After admiring them, I am frivolous with thousands of flowers. Brother Yang, do you think that using this poem about peonies will bring out the best in each other and increase the interest?" Yang Fan shook his head and said, "The peonies are colorful and there are many varieties. Some are like lotus, some are like phoenix, some have dense and towering petals like a crown. Some are white on the outside and red on the inside, gradually evolving like snow reflecting the morning glow. The beauty is indescribable. Brother Cui Shi's poem, I have only heard of its nobility and cannot think of anything else. If you are talking about nobility, who doesn't know that peonies are rich and noble? This is superfluous." Cui Shi was very proud of this poem, but was criticized by Yang Fan to be worthless. His expression changed. Wang Xiuyin could not help but step forward and said, "Brother Yang is talented. How about listening to my poem about pomegranates?" He did not wait for Yang Fan's reply and continued, "The cicadas whistle in the autumn clouds, the locust leaves are all together, the pomegranate's fragrance is low in the courtyard. The flowing clouds are dyed purple poppies, the yellow wax paper buds are red. The jade carved ice bottle is wet with dew, the stains seem to carry Xiang Yi's tears. Xiao Nyang's first marriage is sweet and sour, chewing thousands of water drops." Although they were good at poetry, it was difficult for them to have Chao Zijian's ability to compose a poem in 7 steps. These poems were all old works, carefully chosen and revised repeatedly. It could be considered a good piece of work. Yang Fan still shook his head. "Not good. If I have the time to appreciate this poem, I might as well see the pomegranate flower and taste the pomegranate seed. It's sweet and sour, it's delicious." Wang Xiyuan's face darkened. He flicked his sleeves and said, "Just a commoner." Behind the crowd, Li Mubai and Miss Ning had already walked over and were standing there listening. Hearing Yang Fan's words, Ning could not help but secretly cover her mouth. Li Mubai stroked his beard and looked at Yang Fan, frowning inadvertently. "In Yang Zheng, you, had a square face and a square temperament. He did not reject Yang Fan, but when he saw Yang Fan's disdain for poetry, he was not convinced. He stepped forward and said, "I have a poem about bamboo. Brother Yang, please have a look." Thick green and sparse stems surround the Xiang River. The spring wind pulls out the dragon's tail. The color embraces the frost and pink light. The branches support the shoe brocade and the red clouds rise. The sound of knocking is not vulgar. The forest is full of wind, and swords and spears are horizontal. The black marks cannot be washed away by the bitter rain. Still carrying the blood of Xiang Yi's tears. The slender branches sweep the autumn moon. The shadow passes through the forest like snow. Today I am ashamed of Zio's heart. I love this gentleman's name. Good poem! Good poem! His words are magnificent, and his ambitions are noble. Artistic conception is fascinating. Before Yang Fan said anything, the people around him began to sing. It seemed that these people were also afraid that Yang Fan would continue to belittle him. So they first created a momentum for Zheng Yu. Yang Fan looked at Zheng Yu and said with a smile, "Brother Zheng, how long did it take you to write this poem?" Zheng Yu was stunned. He had never met anyone who asked him this question. But Zheng Yu's temperament was upright. He would answer any question asked, and he did not want to lie. After thinking for a while, he honestly said, "I used less than an hour to write this poem and wrote the first 7 lines. Afterwards, I deliberated over each word and changed a few words, but I did not feel anything for the last few lines. Until one day, when I came back after drinking, I walked alone in the bamboo forest under the moonlight and suddenly realized something. When I went home, I finished the whole poem in one go. It took a total of 10 days. Yang Fan shook his head and said regretfully, "You are born into a noble family of the Zheng family, so you are naturally superior to others. If you spent 10 days doing things, who knows how many things you could have done for the benefit of the country, the people, and the family. But you did not think of progress, and wasted your good time on these small things. It really is a pity." Zheng Yu did not think that he would put on the face of an elder and arrogantly lecture him. He couldn't help but be dumbfounded, and for a moment he could not say anything. Cui Yi said, "Nonsense. The book of history says that poets express their aspirations. Poetry is pure and beautiful, and is close to human nature. If you do not learn poetry, you cannot stand. If you do not know etiquette, you are at a loss for what to do. Confucius said, to stand at 30 means to understand the book of poetry. Only then can you stand. If you do not learn poetry, how can you say that?" Yang Fan said disdainfully, "That's just **T. Cui Yi was stunned and angry and said, You are a high official of the court. How can you be so rude, so impudent?" Yang Fan said, "You said that if you do not learn poetry, you have nothing to say. Isn't that what I said? You gave a long speech, and I only replied with 2 words, **T. Is it you who does not speak, or me who does not speak?" Yang Fan slowly stood up and said, "Poetry can cultivate one's mind, refine one's language, and can also help one's interest in traveling, drinking, and having fun. Its use is only SOSO, and in governing the country and the people of the world. It is not the least bit helpful. You all come from aristocratic families. If you have aspirations for the world, if you have a heart for the people, who knows how many more things you can do compared to others. It's a pity that you all have wasted your good time in babbling." Yang Fan looked at them with disdain and said, "When you all chew on words, do you know how many great things Yang has done for the court, for the country, for the people of the world? Not to mention the officials of the court, even the elders in charge of the aristocratic families like you all, who would spend all day moaning about nothing." Yang Fan looked up to the sky and laughed and said, "A real man either dominates the battlefield or governs and weaves politics. Poetry is an insignificant path. It is a pastime for us scholars to govern the world, to establish our lives, and to achieve the goals of the people. Qin Huang and Han Wu, who established their country with poetry, Fong Mao and Du Duan, who established their achievements with poetry. If there is poetry, then there is. If there is none, then there is no harm. If there is no poetry, then there is no standing. If there is no poetry, then there is no speech. Ha ha! What a big bullsh, *T. It's not as good as a mouthful of cured meat, a mouthful of steamed bun. Yang Fan laughed and was about to leave, but Wang Xiyuan's face turned red, and he said, "You are not allowed to leave. You are insulting the refined. Wang you're in the wrong here. It was you all who insisted on dragging Yang Longzhong to comment on poetry, so Yang Longzhong can express his own opinion. Although Yang Longzhong's words are a bit crude, I think they are very reasonable. How is it an insult to the refined?" The person who spoke was in his early 20s, tall, but he was Lu Yenji of the Lu family of Hedong. He had been laughing at the children of the Shandong clans, and now that he saw Wang Xiyuan not letting go of Yang Fan, he spoke up for Yang Fan. Lu Yenji's sister, Lu Yi, stood to the side and said with a smile, "That's right. I also think that a real man should either render meritorious service on the battlefield or help the country's politics. The path of poetry is an elegant hobby, but there is nothing wrong with it. To show off too much, to the point of putting most of one's energy into it, that is giving up the big for the small." That's right. Yang Longzhong is right. Brother Lu and Miss Yi are right. The Wei family of Jingzhou, the Pei family of Hedong, the Lu family of Hedong, the Shui family of Hedong, the Yang family of Hongnong, the Du family of Jingzhou, and the Shao family of Lanling all supported Yang Fan. The aristocratic families of Shandong, represented by the Wang, Chui, Lu, Li, and Zheng families, were friends with the Zhou, Lu, Qi, and Wei families, and had been taught by Great Duke Tang. They also had the legacy of Zhou and Kong, and advocated Confucianism. They had always considered themselves to be pure and upright, so naturally they were the most outstanding in education. The aristocratic families of Guanlong were in a dangerous position, and from the end of the Western Jin dynasty until the beginning of the Tang dynasty, wars broke out and warlords divided their territories. In order to survive, these aristocratic families rarely practiced Confucianism and only respected martial arts. In addition, from the Northern Wei dynasty until the beginning of the Tang dynasty, a large number of Hu people entered the country, including Li Tang's royal family and a portion of the aristocratic families of Guanlong Group. Therefore, although the descendants of the aristocratic families of Guanlong Group had been educated since they were young, and their attainments in poetry were not shallow, their overall level was inferior to the aristocratic families of Shandong. The art of poetry was not their best skill, and on top of that, they advocated martial arts. Their views on poetry were the same as Yang Fan's, and they competed with the aristocratic families of Shandong openly and secretly. At this time, it would be strange if they didn't stand on Yang Fan's side and watch the fun of the aristocratic families of Shandong. As soon as these people joined the battle, it became a war of words between the descendants of the aristocratic families of Guanlong and the aristocratic families of Shandong. Both sides were pointing fingers and arguing with each other, arguing until their faces were red and necks were thick. The only difference was that one side was cursing Tian Shenu, poor quota, and the other side was cursing son of AB *th inhuman. Fighting for the Tao, all the so-called elegance was swept away. Chapter 594. The Wang family of Taiyuan was now hiding their strength and accumulating power. Therefore, the descendants of the Wang family did not want to go against the Guanlong aristocrats. But now the descendants of the two aristocratic groups were arguing fiercely. If they did not take a stand, it was hard to say whether they could win the friendship of the Guanlong aristocrats or not. Therefore, the descendants of the Wang family had to take a stand. Wang Xiyuan thought for a while and picked up a soft target. He started to make things difficult for Yang Fan, who was standing at the side and watching the two sides refute each other's arguments. Wang Xiyuan said angrily, "Yang Fan, your glib words are just to cover up your shortcoming of not knowing poetry. Our Wang family does not care about such a vulgar person. It is beneath our status to argue with you. Brothers, let's forget about it. Why do we have to hurt our friendship for such a person? Yang Fan suddenly looked surprised and asked, "If I remember correctly, you are a descendant of the Wang family of Taiyuan, right?" Wang Xiyuan looked at him coldly and said, "What?" Yang Fan smiled and said nothing. Lai Junqin, the former deputy prime minister of the imperial censor and now the county lieutenant of Tongzhou, is an official of the same court as me and is quite familiar with him. I suddenly remembered that Lai Junqin is the son-in-law of the Wang family. I have not heard from him for a long time. I wonder how he is now. Brother Wang, would you like to tell me? When Wang Xiyuan heard this, his face immediately turned purple, and he couldn't say a word. Who was Lai Junqin? He was a famous ruffian in Chang, and a vulgar person who did not know how to read. After he became an official, he committed all kinds of crimes and was notorious all over the world. But such a person forced the Wang family of Taiyuan to humbly marry their daughter to him. Speaking of which, the daughter of the Wang family was Wang Xiyuan's aunt. The Wang family could not do anything to him, but he was defeated by Yang Fan. He fell from the high and mighty deputy prime minister of the imperial censor to Tongzhou and became a county lieutenant. Because Lai Junqin was originally from Chang, and everyone in Chang and knew about his past and present, and because he forced the daughter of the Wang family of Taiyuan to marry, everyone in Shandong knew about him. Wang Xiyuan's words just now were righteous and powerful. Now that Yang Fan suddenly asked about Junqin, it was tantamount to a big slap in the face of the Wang brothers. Yang Fan was different from these sons of aristocratic families who were raised in a golden cage. Whether it was his knowledge, experience, or temperament from his previous performance, he was very calm and honest. But today, Yang Fan was unruly, looking down on the prestigious sex. Thinking of his aggressive behavior in the Farong restaurant, Senior Li couldn't help but feel displeased. From what he knew, Yang Fan was not such a wild and unruly person. This person's behavior was like a completely different person. Li Mubai frowned and couldn't help saying, "This Yang Fan is too unrestrained." Ning Ke looked at Guanlong and the sons of Shandong's aristocratic families quarreling endlessly. Some were arguing fiercely, some were helping, and some were watching. He could not help sighing and laughing. Great-grandfather, it should be the sons of the Chui, Zheng, and Wang families who are arrogant. As for Erlang, I just think he is quite good at making trouble. Li Mubai glanced at Ning Ku and snorted. This girl had always been arrogant. Except in front of her mother, brother, and his friend, she would show a little girlish air. Most of the time, she was as quiet as a nun who had been meditating in a nunnery for many years. She was very cold, so it was not easy to make her lively. It was rare that she looked at Yang Fan in a different light. He didn't know what characteristics Yang Fan had that made her like him so much. Although Li Mubai had lived for 88 years, there were still many things in this world that he couldn't figure out. In terms of family background and status, Ning had seen many people who were higher than Yang Fan. In terms of appearance and temperament, there were 4 or 5 people in the corridor who were not inferior to Yang Fan. Chui Shi's face was like jade and his eyes were like stars. He seemed to be more handsome than Yang Fan, but there was no reason to talk about first sight. Li Mubai called Lin Zixiong and whispered a few words to him. Then he said to Ning Ku, "Girl, have you seen enough? Let's go." Oh. Ning Ku glanced at Yang Fan with a smile and then slowly left with Li Mubai. 2 members of the Li mansion followed them step by step. Ahem, what are you guys shouting for? When they were quarreling in circles, a majestic voice suddenly sounded outside. A middle-aged man who was frowning and watching in the crowd looked back. He couldn't help but exclaimed softly and quickly stepped aside. He cupped his hands and said, "Uncle Lin." Uncle Lin was Lin Zixiong. In terms of age, he was only 3 years old, but this person who was almost the same age as him respectfully called him Uncle Lin. The person who spoke was also a disciple of the Li family, but he was not from the Li family of Longxi, but from the Li family of Zhao County. His name was Li Shangyin. He moved to Wanyan County of Chang, and when he was young, at the age of 20, he passed the Jinshe examination and became the registrar of Ji County. This time he specially asked for leave to congratulate the old master, Li, on his birthday. Li Jinghu, Li Shucai, and Li Jingyu stood beside Li Shangyin. They were all disciples of the Li family from Zhao County. As for the disciples of the Li family from Longxi, they couldn't be seen here. They were all busy with their ancestor's birthday and had no time to spare. It was not that the Li family had no servants to use. It was just that the younger generation had to take care of such a big day in order to show their filial piety. These people always bowed to Lin Zixiong. Whether they recognized him or not, they all knew that he was an extraordinary person and made way for him. Lin Zixiong glanced at those young men who were still flushed with anger and snorted heavily. Today is the birthday of our Li clan's great-grandfather, but you guys are quarreling here. Is this what you call etiquette, what you call gentleness? Wang Xiyuan knew that this person should be someone with a high position in the Li family. He respectfully defended himself. Elder, it's not that I don't know etiquette, it's that Yang Fan is being disrespectful. The Tao of poetry in his words. Lin Zixiong rolled his eyes and disdainfully interrupted him. The Tao of poetry has always been a word game to cultivate one's character and add elegance to one's mood. Other than that, it has no use at all. I have done many great things for the old master Li in this half of my life, and not a single one of them can be accomplished by relying on some dog-fart poem. Wang Xiyuan's face turned red again. He was about to argue with Lin Zixiong again when Lin Zixiong pointed at Yang Fan. Yang Longzhong is younger than many of you, but he is already a minister of the Ministry of Justice, a fifth-rank official of the imperial court. All of you were appointed officials much earlier than him. Now, how many of you are more senior than him? If one's career is not as good as others, let's talk about achievements. A few years ago, Mo led 100,000 elite Turkic soldiers to attack our Ming Dynasty's garrison. It was Yang Longzhong who devised a strategy and ingeniously used it to first rescue the 5,000 soldiers of Flying Fox Mouth and then drive back the 100,000 Turkic soldiers. What were you doing at that time? If I let you go to the battlefield and recite a few poems, would you be able to accomplish such a feat? A group of cruel officials from the imperial censorate ran amok in the southern frontier and incited a popular uprising. Yang Longzhong beheaded the cruel officials and appeased the people. He made rewards and punishments clear and mediated in many ways. The rebellious barbarians of the Man, Yao, and Pan prefectures were completely convinced. Only then did they cease their banners and cease their drums and beg for the imperial court's surrender. If I tell you to go and boast about it, can you do it? None of the aristocratic families said anything. The heads of the aristocratic families had gathered in Chang, and for the matter of the southern frontier. The aristocratic families viewed the southern frontier incident as an important opportunity to change the political situation in the imperial court. And this opportunity was created by Yang Fan. If this matter was easy, the aristocratic families would have done it long ago. Why would they only treat it as if it was a treasure today? To belittle this matter, wasn't that the same as admitting that the aristocratic families were useless? Lin Zixiong glanced at them coldly and said, Yang Longzhong's contributions to the country are not limited to this. It's just that some matters are confidential and I can't let you know. I can only tell you that Yang Longzhong's contributions are not inferior to Su Qin and Zhang Yi's ability to unite and form alliances. This is a contribution to the expansion of territory and a contribution to the rise and fall of the country. Everyone in the corridor was silent. Lin Zixiong let out a breath and cupped his hands at Yang Fan. Ignorant child, please forgive me for offending you. Yang Fan shook his head and smiled. I'm not that narrow-minded. There's no offense. Yang Fan walked in front of Cui Shi and cupped his hands. Cui Shi did not understand what he meant and hurriedly returned the gesture. Yang Fan said, Reciting poems and composing songs is an elegant matter. If you invite me for an elegant matter, there's nothing wrong with it. Yang Fan was first arrogant and then respectful. Shui Shi was momentarily at a loss of how to respond. Yang Fan's tone changed. He smiled and said, "However, to use an elegant matter for a dirty purpose, that's very hateful. If the method used is also an elegant, small way in my eyes, then it's like a child playing with mud. If the adult is in the mood, then play with him. But if the adult is not in the mood, then why would he play with him? Don't you think so?" Reciting poems and composing songs were not only small ways in his mouth, but also children and mud. Once these words came out, everyone was in an uproar. But with Lin Zixiong, an elder whom no one knew of but whose status was definitely not low, no one dared to act rashly. Lin Zixiong saw that Yang Fan was unforgiving. He couldn't help but feel angry and amused. He once patted his chest in front of Grand Elderly and guaranteed that Yang Fan had a steady temperament and was experienced in handling matters. He had the air of a general and could be entrusted with important tasks. But in the end, from the overbearing attitude of a few days ago to today's arrogance, it was as if Yang Fan had changed into a different person. Lin Zixiong was afraid that he would continue to show off and hurriedly said, "Yang Longzhong, Grand Elder Li invites you to meet him in the rear residence." Hearing this, Yang Fan grinned and bowed to the crowd. He performed the proper etiquette before leaving. Needless to say, the Wei family of Jingzhou, the Pei family of Hedong, the Lu family of Hedong, the Shui family of Hedong, the Yang family of Hongnong, the Du family of Jingzhou, and the Xiao family of Lanling all bowed in return. After leaving the crowd, Lin Zixiong said in a low voice, "Brother Yang, the things that happened recently are really not like you." Yang Fan smiled and said, "After my reprimand, many of the scions of the aristocratic families kept quiet out of fear and could only cup their hands and listen. Such awe-inspiring power. Not like that Lin Zixiong from the Miaolo who was not a big shot." Lin Zixiong was speechless and could only laugh bitterly. As soon as Yang Fan left, the crowd began to discuss him. Some praised him for his awe-inspiring power. Some criticized him for being arrogant and conceited. Some admired him for looking down on the scions of the aristocratic families in Shandong, and some gloated over the fact that he had offended so many scions of the aristocratic families. But no matter what, after today, the Guanlong aristocratic family and the aristocratic families of Shandong would remember the name Yang Fan. Chapter 595. Great-grandfather Yang Longzhong is here. Invite him in. Yang Fan dusted his clothes and walked into the hall. The hall was very big. This was Yang Fan's first impression. There were many people in the hall. This was Yang Fan's second impression. In the spacious hall, there were many couches and small tables. Nowadays, only high officials and nobles would tirelessly adhere to the ancient system of separate meals. Every table was filled with sumptuous food and ancient utensils. Wooden lacquered goblets, bronze wine goblets, wooden ladles behind every table. There was a guest dressed solemnly and solemnly. Most of them were old people. The youngest already had white hair on his temples, which matched well with the ancient wine utensils. This empire was ruled by a 70-year-old old woman, and these millennium-old aristocratic families were controlled by these white-haired old men. No matter if it was their wisdom, experience, they were all accumulated and settled over the years. No one dared to look down on them. Yang Fan did not fear their status and power, but he maintained sufficient respect for these wise and far-sighted elders. Li Mubai had already changed into a burial robe and was smiling as he sat on the seat of honor. Yang Fan stepped forward and used a steady and powerful voice to wish the old man a happy birthday. The old men all knew that Li Mubai admired this young man in front of him and had the intention to promote another young man after Shenmu. However, this required them to have a common ground. As long as they nodded their heads, this young man in front of them would immediately possess an inexhaustible amount of wealth and endless resources. although this power was far from young Master Zhang's. The succession hall originally didn't have any obvious sect or hidden sect. The succession hall was the only representative of the aristocratic families elected by the aristocratic families. However, no one expected Shinmu to pull up a force that was enough to contend against young Master Zhang from the succession hall. He turned the Dark Shadow, a peripheral organization of the succession hall, into a hidden sect that was on equal footing. As a result, the succession hall was split into two. Now they agreed to Li Mubai's suggestion and were willing to build another force outside of young Master Jiang and Shinmu in order to stabilize the structure of the succession hall. However, with Shanmu's previous example, they naturally wouldn't give Yang Fan a huge force that had the hope of splitting into a third sect. Even so, such a force was what countless people dreamed of. Although they believed in Li Mubai's foresight, they also needed to further evaluate Yang Fan in order to confirm this person's ability. Today, they were only going to meet this person first. Yang Fan was neither servile nor overbearing. His well-behaved performance left a very good first impression on these old fellows. At this moment, someone tiptoed in from the side door. It wasn't just one person. They were barefooted and separately walked towards their respective masters. After whispering in each other's ears, the elders looked at Yang Fan with a slightly strange gaze. It was obvious that they already knew about the scene that happened in the garden just now. Thanks to the heavens, this old man is already over 70 years old. I'm already 88 this year, but I'm still alive and kicking. Hee. I originally thought that there wouldn't be a birthday celebration. It would be fine if I just invited a few close friends for a few cups of wine. However, the children didn't agree, which is why many of my relatives and friends were disturbed. Grand Elder Li's face was glowing as he said, "In this hall, everyone is this old man's close friends of many years. They are all old fellows. This old man's close friends have all heard of Erlang's reputation. Why don't you sit with everyone? Everyone wants to meet you and get to know you. Erlang is a young man. If he sits here, I'm afraid he won't be able to drink to his heart's content. In a while, this old man's grandsons will accompany Erlang to the front to drink. You can drink to your heart's content." As Grand Elder Li spoke, the MC walked to Yang Fan's side and led him to his seat. Yang Fan's seat was at the bottom. In terms of age, except for Dugayu, the youngest of the people present could be his grandfather, so there was nothing to be unconvinced about. Yang Fan came to the back of the table and meticulously knelt down according to the ancient etiquette. He tidied up his robe and then raised his head. Before looking for Dugayu or the appearance of the others, Yang Fan first glanced at Li Mubai and was surprised to find that Miss Ning Ku was sitting beside Li Mubai. She was wearing a long tunic with big sleeves and dark cyan clothes. If one looked at it from a slightly different angle, he would find that the clothes were faintly glowing. He didn't know what kind of material it was, but it added some redness to Ning Ku's overly white and tender face. Her beautiful black hair was combed into a swan bun, which looked like a startled bird spreading its wings and about to fly. Because she was an unmarried woman, she kept a hair tail hanging behind her shoulders, like a swallow's tail, which looked very elegant. Seeing Yang Fan looking at her, Ning Ku nodded to him gracefully. A white-haired old man suddenly asked, interrupting the exchange between Yang Fan and Ning Ku, "I heard that Erlang is from Jiaoji?" Yang Fan didn't know these people, and Li Mubai seemed to have no intention of introducing them. Today was originally a test of Yang Fan by the aristocratic families, and the important thing was Yang Fan's performance. Yang Fan glanced at him and nodded. "Yes, I grew up in Jiaoji and came to Luoyang when I was an adult." Jiaoji had been the territory of the Central Plains dynasty since the Qin dynasty. Although there were changes during the period, in the hearts of these old men, it was always the territory of the Central Plains dynasty, so they didn't regard Yang Fan as a foreigner. It was just that Jiaoji was a little remote, which inevitably gave people a feeling of being uncivilized. The old man nodded and said, "Erlang is so young and has no connections in the capital city. It's admirable that you can make such great achievements in just a few years." They knew the rumor of the affair between Yang Fan and Princess Taiping, but Yang Fan's achievements were all based on his real ability. Even if he really had a relationship with Princess Taiping, it only provided him with an opportunity. The important thing was that he had the ability. In order to form an alliance and unite, aristocratic families often connected through women's marriage. But who would attribute their achievements to the credit of their children's marriage? Xue Huai was the empress's gigolo. The empress had twice ordered him to lead troops into battle. He commanded an army of hundreds of thousands and had countless good officials as his assistants. What achievements did he make? So although these elders had heard of the affair between Yang Fan and Princess Taiping and believed it was true, they didn't look down on him because of it. They also didn't attribute his achievements to the help of a woman. If the knowledge of these elders of aristocratic families was shallow and vulgar, they would be no different from the people in the marketplace. Yang Fan bowed and said, "Elders, you flatter me. Although I have my own efforts, I also have the support of noble people and opportunities to make contributions." This answer was not only appropriate, but also in line with the wishes of these old men. When people were young, they often felt that their lives were in their own hands, not in heaven. These people from aristocratic families had strong family backgrounds, so it was even more so. But the older people were, the more they were in awe of heaven and earth, and the more they felt that there was a mysterious force that affected everything in the world. Yang Fan's words, combined with their many years of experience, made them quite agree. All the elders nodded their heads. Seeing everyone's appreciation, Li Mubai felt as if a large stone had been lifted from his heart. Stroking his beard, he was happy. At this time, another elder suddenly asked, "This old man has also heard of Erlang's heroic deeds. For example, in Zianchuo, he played a trick on the Turkic great Yabgu, stirring up a conflict between the Ashina and Ashina tribes. In Tubo, he used a small trick to provoke open and secret strife between the king of Tubo and the great minister Luin Qinling. This time, when Wang Xiaojie sent troops to Anqi, the king of Tubo refused to send Luin Qinling. Only then did our court succeed. Because of this, Luan Qinling became even more suspicious of the king of Tubo. The two sides are now like fire and water. Another example is the trip to the southern border. These people knew Yang Fan's deeds like the back of their hands. They knew even more than the empress. It sounded frightening, but to put it bluntly, it was worthless. When Yang Fan did these things, he did not hide them from the aristocratic families. In fact, many of these things were done with the help of the aristocratic families. For example, understanding the situation of the Turks infiltrating Zianchuo, pretending to be Ashina Musi, and accompanying Xiao Fei, Zhang Yi, and the others were all members of the aristocratic families. Another example was when he sowed discord with the great minister in Tubo. His previous preparations, including the fact that the merchant from the central plains acted as bait, were all members of the aristocratic families. In the southern border, other than when things happened suddenly in Yaozhou, Yang Fan could only rely on himself to fight. Later on, however, the aristocratic families began to participate. In one breath, this person listed all the proud deeds of Yang Fan's life. It might be an exaggeration to say that it was his life, but how old was Yang Fan? From a small commoner to a fifth-grade official, the great deeds he had done in this period of time were things that many people would struggle to accomplish in their entire lives. Just based on this, he was able to laugh proudly in the officialdom. Finishing, this person said, "This old man has always observed Erlang's conduct. He is most skilled at using intelligence. A man conquers the world and loves to kill in all directions, sweep through all directions with his sword. His achievements are glorious, and his name shines in the annals of history. As for Erlang's conduct, although it is meritorious to the present and beneficial to the future, it is not well known. Otherwise, the world would have heard of it long ago. Was it because Erlang did not have military power in his hands at that time, did not have the corresponding strength, and had no choice but to do so? Yang Fan knew that these old fellows were testing his style and method of doing things, so he answered seriously, "Intelligence and strength. If I can use both and achieve my goal, then Junior will definitely use intelligence instead of strength. If I have no choice and use intelligence to achieve my goal, then Junior will choose strength. The reason is very simple. Kill 1,000 people, lose half 100. Although using strength is a shortcut to one's fame, the sacrifice is the lives of countless people. Moreover, the purpose of war is to obtain. If one can use intelligence to achieve one's goal, then why use force to ruin everything?" Another old man chuckled and said, "In that case, when Erlang does things both intelligence and strength can be achieved, he must choose intelligence and abandon strength. Then, in Erlang's opinion, intelligence is the best method to achieve your goal?" Yang Fan spoke frankly with assurance. In Junior's opinion, intelligence and strength are only methods. To achieve one's goal, one needs cultural education. Wisdom, on the other hand, was only an external manifestation of cultural education. Emperor Gaozu of Han once said, "The brave conquer the world, the strategist rule the world." In fact, to conquer the world, above military force, strategy is also needed. Otherwise, in terms of bravery, who can compare to the bravery of a tyrant? Why was it Liu Bang who conquered the world? Guan Yu passed through 5 passes and killed 6 generals, killed Hua Xiong while warming up the wine, galloped on the battlefield, and was frustrated and excited, but he still lost Maiqing. Strategists use intelligence, strategizing in a tent to decide victory from 1,000 miles away. Wise like Sun Bin, he escaped from Daliang and avenged his humiliation at Mailing Road. Being a hero is only a matter of a moment. Those who can achieve great feats are all people who can borrow power, use strategy, use intelligence, and understand cultural education. Master Gue Gu once talked about swords in Gue Gu. The sword of an ordinary man moves like the wind, taking lives. The sword of a general attacks cities and plunder lands, shaking the world. But once the sword of a king is used, it can subdue the feudal vassals and unify the world. A white-haired old man suddenly asked with a smile, since Erlang despises strength but values intelligence, especially culture, "Why did you mock those scholars in the back garden as playing with mud?" Chapter 596. Yang Fan was startled. After thinking for a moment, he smiled and said, "To Yang Fan, elder is a person of virtue and prestige. How can you tease Junior with your words?" The white-haired old man was slightly surprised and asked, "How did I tease you?" Yang Fan said, "A child from the countryside. His mother told him to gather pigweed to feed the pigs. He gathered a basket of pigweed and came back with a pile of mud to play with. I can't say that he only went out with a pile of mud, can I? By the same logic, Junior has never said that studying is to play with mud. Instead, I said that scholars spend all day reciting poems and composing songs, neglecting their main job. This is forgetting to gather pigweed and only caring about playing with mud." The white-haired old man raised his eyebrows and said, "Is there a difference?" Yang Fan said, "There is a difference. There is a big difference. Scholars study and learn knowledge and reason. What they produce is wisdom. If you want to say that the use of poems and lyrics is like an army's command before a battle, the army song during a battle, and the eulogy after victory, it's like adding flowers to a brocade, but if it's not, haha. It cannot be used when an official is in charge of the country's affairs. It cannot be used when an official is writing a memorial to the court. It cannot be used when Taisher Gong is recording history. Even when Junior is being questioned by the elders here, he cannot use it during questions and answers. What does elder think it is, if not the mud that is used to gather pigweed?" The old man was slightly angry and said, "Today is eunuch Li's birthday. The hall is full of joy and the guests are like clouds. Would Erlang be willing to put up a pile of mud to make eunuch Li happy?" Although people who were well versed in poetry and books were good at composing poems, it was not easy to make them compose a poem in a short period of time. Moreover, Yang Fan's performance was clearly not good at poetry. In the end, this old man still thought that Yang Fan's contemptuous attitude towards poetry was because he was not good at poetry and did not want to lose face in front of those aristocratic families. That was why he pretended to be arrogant. Therefore, he still wanted to make things difficult for him and cut down his arrogance. After the old man finished speaking, some people who appreciated Yang Fan felt that it was inappropriate to let Yang Fan lose face in front of so many people. Although Li Mubai also wanted to teach Yang Fan a lesson, he did not want him to lose face in front of so many people. However, the person who asked the question was the master of the Zheng clan of Yingyang. As the master and the person who recommended Yang Fan, it was not good for him to be too partial. So, he winked at Dugayu and asked him to help Yang Fan out. Dugayu understood and hurriedly coughed to find a way out of this embarrassing situation for Yang Fan. Everyone here is an elder. Erlang need not be nervous. Just recite a few lines of poetry for the elders to appraise. Erlang was an expert in military affairs, an expert in the administration of culture. Plus, he was well versed in the study of stratagem and change of tactics. A person's energy is limited. If he is not good at poetry, then it is nothing. Here. Just now, after Elder Zheng spoke, Yang Fan lowered his head and did not speak. After Dugayu's words to help him smooth things over, Yang Fan still did not speak. He only lowered his head and pondered. This caused everyone's eyes to focus on him. They were curious in their hearts. Could it be Yang Fan really wants to mix with a lump of mud? After a moment, Yang Fan slowly raised his head and smiled at Elder Zheng. He said, "How can this junior dare to refuse an elder's order? Then this junior will mix with a lump of mud in this birthday hall. I only hope that this junior can coax the god of longevity to laugh heartily. This can also be considered as doing my part." When everyone heard this, they revealed a surprised expression. Could it be that this Yang Fan really knew how to compose poetry? Could he really compose a poem in such a short time? In such a short period of time, it was not easy for him to compose a rhyme, a limerick that suited the mood and the situation. She wondered what kind of poem this young Erlang, who compared reciting poems and composing proses to mud, would produce. For a moment, all the elders of the aristocratic families held their breath, ready to see the lump of mud that Yang Fan would come up with. Ning stared at Yang Fan intently with a slightly nervous look on his face. Since Yang Fan disparaged writing poetry to mud, then it was not a big deal if he could not compose a good poem. In any case, he had already said that it was mud. It was normal for him not to have any attainments in this field. However, Ning rarely cared about a person, and Yang Fan happened to be one of them. Of course, she still hoped that Yang Fan could be in a good mood. This inevitably made her nervous for him. Yang Fan said, "Since Elder Zheng has set a topic, then I will compose a 7-rule poem to praise the grand occasion of the Li's mansion today." Elder Zheng was also a little surprised. He restrained his contempt and said in a deep voice, "I'm all ears." Yang Fan looked around, obviously looking for materials. He glanced at the 12 carved red sandalwood screens on the opposite side, then looked at the incense burner on the small table in the corner, and finally fixed his eyes on the red carpet in front of the hall. Before Yang Fan came here, he had just performed the green waist here. On the red carpet in front of the hall, there was a red flower left by a singer and dancer. Yang Fan smiled, raised the crescent-shaped feather cup, and recited slowly. The painted screen covers the light of auspicious clouds. Luo Chihua flies to the white jade hall. The silver wine is poured. The fish tail is poured. The golden stove ashes are filled with the fragrance of duck heart. Gently shaking the green water, the green moth is restrained. Touching the red silk, the white wrist is wild. Today, I promise to listen to the grace and honor together. I will not refuse to drink 1,000 cups. It was quiet, very quiet. In the hall were the heads of various aristocratic families and important elders, all of whom were well read. Yang Fan's poem could not be regarded as a world-shaking work, but it could definitely be regarded as one of the best poems for birthday banquets. It perfectly described the happy and auspicious atmosphere of a wealthy family in accordance with the situation and the hall filled with riches and honor. To compose such a 7-tone poem in such a short period of time was already not an easy feat. Yang Fan had repeatedly shown his disdain for poetry, so it was obvious that he had not spent much effort on it before. Thus, for him to be able to compose such a good poem, it was especially evident that he had a good foundation. This strong contrast in attitude and achievement was the most amazing. Everyone was waiting for him to make a pile of real mud, but he made a vivid clay figurine. It seemed that his previous attitude was obviously not to make excuses for himself, but to really disdain it. A strange light suddenly flashed in Ningke's eyes, and Li Mubai stopped twirling his beard. After a long while, he slowly smoothed it down and looked at Yang Fan with a smile in his eyes. Yang Fan finished reciting this poem. Seeing that no one responded for a long time, he had to continue the show. He cupped his hands and said to the crowd, "My incompetence! My incompetence!" Yang Fan was educated by his family since he was a child. Especially after his father was banished to Lingnan, he pinned all his hopes of reviving the family reputation on his only son, so he put more effort into his education. Later, Yang Fan went overseas with his master. Although his great master, Curly Beard, had a rough appearance and was the leader of the underworld in the past, he was the son of the richest man in Yangzhou. He had been taught by famous teachers since he was a child, so he was full of knowledge. When he wanted to fight for the world, he did not rely on unparalleled martial arts, but on his scholarly knowledge and ability to govern the world. During these years overseas, Curly Beard did not instruct his little disciple in martial arts, but he personally taught him literature. Naturally, Yang Fan's literary talent was not bad. An old man snorted. "Respect is the head of virtue, but be cautious. Young man, since you are good at poetry, when the young masters in the back garden invite you to recite poems, no matter how disdainful you are in your heart, why not casually say yes? Why deliberately belittle and play to the gallery? You must know that one should not rely on one's power, and one should not be arrogant. Being reserved and humble is the way of a modest gentleman." Yang Fan cupped his hands and said, "This elder is," Yu answered for the old man, "this elder is Duke Chui of Bowling." It turned out to be the Chui family of Bowling. Then, whether he was the head of the Chui family or an important elder of the Chui family, he was an extremely outstanding figure. Yang Fan said sincerely, "How dare I not speak frankly in front of an elder? I have no intention of playing to the gallery, but this is indeed my view on poetry. Since this junior disdains it, there is no need for me to conceal my disdain. Today in the hall, if it were not for the elder's request, this junior would not have composed this poem. If the world was at peace, this junior would not have needed to worry about the country and its people, nor would I have needed to run around for food. Perhaps I would have the leisure to recite poems with the young masters and enjoy myself. But now that the 4 towns of Anchi have returned to our court, and they have been conquered, the Tubo and Turkic Khaganate have not forgotten to cut off our path of retreat and recapture Anchi. The various upheavals in the southern border have been pacified, but what is important is the various policies of the court. Otherwise, rebellions will rise again and become a great disaster. Cruel officials run amok in the court. Since all the elders know this junior's affairs in great detail, you must also understand the bitterness of this junior's struggle with these cruel officials. In the face of such important matters concerning the national economy and people's livelihood, the path of poetry is naturally a lump of mud. If this junior's poem can enter the discerning eyes of all the elders, then in this junior's eyes, it is just a lump of mud that looks a little better and is of no great use. Chui Gong still wanted to speak, but Li Mubai smiled and said, "Old Chui, is the matter you want to discuss with Erling about the country and the world or poetry? Are you planning to persuade Erling to immerse himself in the path of poetry and become a master of poetry or a loyal minister of the court?" Chui Gong was taken aback, then broke into laughter. There was indeed no need for him to get entangled with Yang Fan on this matter. In his mind, the most important things were the legacy of the clan and the peace of the world. He had not cared about things like poetry for many years. Li Mubai now liked to collect while he liked to travel. If there was a need for important matters, these elegant interests could be sacrificed at any time. He had never cared whether Yang Fan cared about poetry or not. So why did he have to argue over this matter? These elders were quite open-minded. Once they understood this matter, they dismissed it with a laugh. Chui Gong did not mention poetry at all. Instead, he sternly said, "Does Erlang know why we old men want to see you today?" Yang Fan said with a smile that was not a smile, "Junior has guessed a thing or two. Elder probably wants to groom me to work for the legacy and existence of the family." There was no one in this room who could not be trusted. Even if there were people who were willing to betray others for the sake of profit, no one would betray themselves for the sake of profit. Furthermore, no one could pay a sufficient price for the people in this room to betray anything. Therefore, Yang Fan spoke openly and honestly without hiding anything. Li Mubai smiled and said, "Erlang is a smart person. Then this old man will not play dumb. As long as Erlang is willing to work for us, we can provide all the resources to help you. At the latest, in 5 years, you can become an assistant minister. In another 10 years, you can become a minister. In another 7 years, you can enter the political affairs hall. Before 50 years, you can become a minister. Below only one above millions. What do you think?" Chapter 597. After Li Mubai finished, he thought that Yang Fan would be overjoyed, but he did not expect Yang Fan to be so calm and not even the slightest bit excited. Li Mubai frowned and slowly relaxed. He smiled and said, "Since Erlang became an official, everything has been smooth sailing. At such a young age, you have already become a 5th-ranked official. Perhaps you think that your future will be smooth sailing? I will be frank with you. The higher you go, the harder it is to be promoted, and the harder it is to find a vacant position for you. With your current rank, there will be countless people competing with you for another promotion. Moreover, each of them has a strong background and strong connections. Even if you make great contributions, it will be difficult for you to advance further. We, on the other hand, can give you what a commoner's son lacks the most after entering the officialdom: power and connections. Wei Qing and Hu Zubing may have made great contributions, but Li Guang's contributions are no less than theirs. Why can they have a meteoric rise and have the opportunity to make even greater contributions and be bestowed the title of Marquis? Their glory will last for thousands of years, while Li Guang's life is full of ups and downs. Erlang repelled the Turkic army of 100,000, sowed discord between the Tubo king and prime minister, and quelled the rebellion of the southern barbarians. Any one of these contributions can be announced to the world as a great merit if your surname is Wu. At the very least, you will be promoted to a 5th-ranked general. Why do you have to make an exception and promote a 5th-ranked general? If you can be of use to us, the contributions you have made will one day be repaid accordingly. Not to mention other things, 70 to 80% of the world's education is in the hands of our aristocratic families. We are the mouthpiece of the imperial court. As long as we are willing, your name will spread throughout the world in a day. Even the emperor will not be able to deny you the corresponding official position and power." Grandpa Zheng's eyes flashed, and he lightly laughed. "Perhaps Erlang is worried that we will make Erlang do things that are against his will." Chui Gong said, "This does not conflict with Erlang's personal ambitions. When a person studies hard and strives to reach the top, after entering the officialdom, all he wants is his own future and the future of his family and descendants. He also wants to express his life's worth and make his name known throughout the ages. In order to achieve all of this, he had to acknowledge his master, become friends with his peers, and unite with his comrades. It was rare to see a lone minister who did not recognize his own kin. Wasn't this a family that was bound together for good or bad? A true family would have similar goals and methods. It was just that the scope of support was not limited to the comrades of the same generation, but the entire family. However, a mediocre person sitting in an official position would not only harm others, but also himself. Even if you wanted to promote him, you would not be willing. The vision and bearing of 1,000-year-old family would not be so short-sighted. Regardless of whether one wanted to reach the pinnacle of one's future or to have a long-lasting family legacy, peace and stability were the most basic conditions to achieve all of these. Therefore, if one wanted to pursue one's future, one's family's future, and the future of a country's future, the benefits were interlinked. Emperors wanted to live for thousands of generations. Aristocratic families wanted their foundations to last forever, and officials wanted to achieve success and recognition. It was just that their abilities were different and the size of their desires were different, but there was no difference in essence. So, you don't have to worry that we will make you do something illegal. Yang Fan smiled but did not say anything. This could be recorded in the family tree, an achievement that future generations could boast about. For him, the temptation was not great. The prime minister of a dynasty looked glorious, but it was too easy to become a prisoner. In the few years that Yang Fan had been in the court, the prime ministers had been killed, imprisoned, and exiled one after another, with the powerful Empress Wu Zetian and the two Wu brothers eyeing them covetously. When these prime ministers were in power, they were above tens of thousands of people. When they were not in power, their circumstances were more miserable than beggars. It was precisely because he had seen too many of these things that this promise, which was enough to move the world, was not moved by Yang Fan. He cared more about actual power and benefits. Even if he was unknown in the world, he could control the life and death of others, honor and disgrace. How free and unfettered was that, other than satisfying one's own vanity? What was the use of an empty title? Of course, as a prime minister, one would also have great power. But a prime minister who relied on the support of others to get to his position would never be as glorious as Li Zhaoda. Li Zhaoda himself was the son of an aristocratic family. He relied on his family's ability and connections to get to his position. He was not controlled by others, but Yang Fan was different. If he relied on the help of the aristocratic families to become prime minister, he would inevitably become their puppet. In the process of climbing up step by step, it was unknown how many secrets and weaknesses the aristocratic families would have. The higher his position, the more power he would be controlled by others. Shui Gong saw that he was smiling without saying anything. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. What? Is such a generous reward not enough? Yang Fan said. Then what does Yang need to do? Without waiting for their reply, Yang Fan answered himself. At this stage, you naturally have to continue to be enemies with the cruel officials. On one hand, you have to eradicate the cruel officials who have caused great harm to you, establish your own clean reputation, and obtain the praise of the court. On the other hand, you have to vigorously cater to the policies that are beneficial to the aristocratic families, such as the household tax, agriculture, and imperial examinations. You have to do your utmost to oppose the policies that are not beneficial to you. Next, if I can become an assistant minister, or even prime minister, I have to share honor and disgrace with the aristocratic families in matters concerning the people's livelihood, advancing and retreating together. Shui Gong said in a deep voice, all of this is beneficial to the country and the people. Isn't this your ambition? Yang Fan said, most of the time the interests of the country and the people are the same. But sometimes, to protect the interests of the country, one must harm the interests of the people. Similarly, the imperial court and the aristocratic families are the same. Most of the time, the interests of the imperial court and the aristocratic families are the same. But there are also times when they don't match or even conflict. If I become one of your people, naturally, no matter who is right or who is wrong, whether it benefits me or not, I must brace myself and cheer for the aristocratic families. Duke Zheng said in a deep voice, if you want to gain something, You must naturally pay a price. Yang Fan nodded leisurely and said, What Duke Sheng said is correct. If you want to gain something, you must naturally pay a price. However, between the price and the benefit, only a worthwhile transaction will be done. Prime Minister? To this Yang, the position of Prime Minister is not tempting at all. Chui Gong said in shock, The conditions of an extremely high official are not enough to tempt you? What do you want? Yang Fan said, a messenger for an extremely high official? This matter was originally a part of young Master Zhang's responsibility, right? Now, you've taken out this part of the officialdom and handed it over to one person to manage. To young Master Zhang, this actually doesn't weaken his authority. On the contrary, it frees him from the part that hinders his actions, allowing him to do things more freely. As for me, no matter what I do, everything I want to do, and everything I want to achieve, all comes from young Master Zhang. I'm just a mouth and a pair of hands for him to control when I speak or do things. Unfortunately, I'm not as important as his real mouth and hands. If I'm no longer needed, he can swap me out at any time or sacrifice me. This is not what I want. Li Mubai was quite surprised. He thought that the benefits he had given Yang Fan were things that every official dreamed of. Yang Fan had no reason to refuse, but Yang Fan simply didn't agree. This was truly out of his expectations, and also out of the expectations of all the aristocratic bigwigs present. They had thought that such a generous reward could make Yang Fan tremble in fear and weep. However, Yang Fan's current attitude towards the position of Prime Minister was like a child playing with mud when compared to his great ability to govern the country. It was just like what he said just now. Comparing poetry with the great ability to govern the country, it was just like a child playing with mud. The patriarchs and clan lords looked at each other, not knowing what to say. In the end, it was Li Mubai who calmed himself down and asked slowly, Then, what do you want? Yang Fan raised a finger and said, I only want one thing. Speak. Young Master Zhang's position. Everyone in the hall was stunned, but then they all broke into a smile. To them, Yang Fan's request was as laughable as Buddha hearing that the mischievous Sun Wukong had raised a banner of the great sage, heaven's equal, and wanted to sit on the Jade Emperor's throne. The group of white-haired old men shook their heads with smiles, not even bothering to get angry. Why would they get angry if something was ridiculous to the point of being ridiculous? Li Mubai couldn't help but cough while suppressing his laughter. Erlang is a meticulous thinker with a calm temperament. I don't think he would make such a ridiculous request. Hee, Erlang, you're saying this because you want us to give you a guarantee, right? Don't worry. As long as you agree to our request, you will be one of us. All the old grudges between you and the Lu family will be nothing. As for young Master Zhang, he won't seek revenge and will do his utmost to protect you. Yang Fan shook his head. You misunderstand, Grand Elderly. I am not joking. A Prime Minister's position cannot move me. In my eyes, a Prime Minister is just a lump of mud. Young Master Zhang has been in this position for long enough. It is time for a new person and a new atmosphere. Li Mubai's expression darkened. Absurd. How can the succession hall be controlled by you? Yang Fan said seriously, How can I not feel that it is absurd for all the elders to use a lump of mud to exchange for my service? Only by controlling the succession hall can I make my own decisions without harming the interests of the aristocratic families. Only then can I maintain my freedom and do everything according to my heart. The sea can accommodate hundreds of rivers. If the aristocratic families are so exclusive, then I can only be like before. When my goal is the same as the aristocratic families, I can cooperate with them conditionally. At other times, I can do whatever I want without interfering with each other. I refuse to become a vassal without my own opinion. After saying these powerful words, Yang Fan's expression quickly became gentle again. He stood up and bowed to the elders in the hall. He said with a smile, Today is Grand Elder Li's birthday. Since we can agree, let's not discuss this matter for now. If I disturb Grand Elder Li's birthday because of this, I will be guilty. I hope that all the elders can discuss my proposal in detail after the banquet. Goodbye." After saying this, Yong Fan bowed again and walked out of the hall. With each step he took, he recited a verse. He blurted out a 5-character poem. The fetus transforms into a celestial body. The long cry is in the 9 high mountains. The clear cry of the sky reflects the frosty hair of the sun. 10,000 Li thinks of Liao Kwa. 1,000 mountains gazes at Yutao. The fragrance condenses and disappears. The wind accumulates. When the phoenix climbs, the chickens think of a sudden. If the heaven responds, the fluttering wormwood flies. Yong Fan recited a verse and took a step forward. When he was halfway through, he had already left the hall. When the last verse, "If the heaven responds, the fluttering wormwood flies," reached the ears of everyone, his voice was spiraling, as if it really came from the 9th heaven. This fool! When others wanted to compete with him in poetry, he refused to say anything. Now, he actually wrote a verse in 1 step. He wrote 12 verses at once. He was even more impressive than Chao Zijian. The opportunity to worship the Prime Minister was an official position that Yong Fan would never have a chance to reach in his life. But in his eyes, it was as unbearable as a lump of mud. Now he casually threw out such an even more amazing lump of mud, which made everyone dumbfounded. Only Ning, who was beautiful with a little pride in her eyes. Chapter 598. The center hall of the Li family was also filled with guests. Although the people in this hall did not have the right to sit with the masters of the noble families, they were still famous people. If Yong Fan was not a guest specially invited by the Li family, he, as a 5th-rank official, would barely be able to sit at the end of the table. After Yong Fan came out of the back of the house, he did not leave immediately. Instead, he went to the center hall to drink. Many things did not need to be said clearly. A small gesture could subtly convey your meaning to the other party. Although Yong Fan had decisively refused the invitation of the noble families, he did not leave in a huff. This meant that his refusal was not because he was opposing the noble families, but because he was not satisfied with the conditions they offered. The hall was filled with guests drinking and chatting. Yong Fan went to the center hall and looked around. Just as he was trying to find an empty seat, the Chang and prefectural magistrate Lu Chietian stood up and waved at him with a smile on his face. "Yang Longzhong, come here, come here." Yong Fan responded with a smile and walked to Lu Chietian's side. Lu Chietian said with a smile, "Yang Longzhong, please sit." After he sat down, Lu Chietian poured him a cup of wine. The two drank first, then Lu Chietian turned his body and said in a low voice, "Erlang, you are too young and impetuous. When it comes to these noble families, we still have to be polite. Previously, you fought with the Lu family for a daughter and already offended the Lu family. Today, because of your poem, you offended both Prince Chui and Li Zhang. This will have a great impact on your reputation and future." Lu Chietian's words were sincere and sincere. It was very different from the watertight and smooth official speech that he used when Yong Fan went to visit him a few days ago. Yong Fan could tell that he was sincerely advising him and was slightly surprised. Lu Chietian patted his shoulder and said sincerely, "As an official, the most taboo is to show off. People like that, no matter how powerful their backers are, they can only be arrogant for a while. The way of the king was to make peace amidst the difficulties and create good karma. Those who are not suitable to be enemies with, those who cannot be enemies with, and those who do not have any interest in the relationship for the time being, can all be friends. It doesn't matter if they are real friends or fake friends, but they cannot become real enemies." Yong Fan understood. Today, he had come to attend the Li family's birthday banquet. This matter could not be hidden. Even the emperor had sent people to congratulate him. Who knew how many high-ranking officials of the court had also sent people? How could they not see him at the Li family? What's more, there was also Lu Qiantian, the empress's golden secret agent. When the empress had seized the position of empress and emperor, the Guanlong noble family and the Shandong noble family had always been a great obstacle to her. However, the power of these two aristocratic families was really too great. Even if she had a lot of tricks up her sleeve, she could only use drastic measures to slowly weaken these aristocratic families. For this domineering and tyrannical female empress, even if it was the imperial family, she would still kill them. However, she could only deal with these aristocratic families carefully, which made her even more fearful of them. She promoted the commoners of the Han clan in order to contend against the aristocratic families. She sent trusted aides like Lu Xiantian to Chang, and to keep an eye on the aristocratic families. Since Lu Xiantian was the empress's trusted aide, his attitude towards the aristocratic families was naturally the same as the empress's. Yang Fan's disdainful attitude and hostility towards the aristocratic families in the back garden had already become Lu Xiantian's confidant. As the empress's loyal lackey, he would definitely report to the empress about Yang Fan's performance at the Li family today. In the information he had, Yang Fan was originally a high-ranking official of the Han clan that the empress thought highly of. Coupled with his hostile attitude towards the aristocratic families, he would definitely be favored and valued by the empress in the future. Then, according to his theory of making friends in the midst of difficulties, he naturally had to make friends with the empress in advance. Yang Fan's expression quickly became serious, and a trace of regret flashed across his eyes. He solemnly nodded and said, "You are right, Mr. Lu." Yang Fan was indeed reckless. His change of expression was seen by Lu Xiantian. Lu Xiantian's smile became more amiable and gentle. He patted Yang Fan's shoulder and comforted him. "Fortunately, what you did this time did not conflict with the aristocratic families. I think the elders of the aristocratic families will not take it too seriously. However, from now on, you must remember the rules of being an official, and do not act recklessly." Yang Fan hurriedly nodded, grabbed the wine pot, and poured a cup of wine for Lu Xiantian. He raised the cup and sincerely thanked him. "I am young and inexperienced, so I do not know much about the affairs of the officialdom. From now on, I hope you can give me more advice." This Yang Fan was quite talented in acting. If he did not become an official, he might as well become a disciple of Master Rume. Perhaps he could even surpass her and become a great minister of the musical house. Ning sat quietly on the bed with her legs crossed and her hands gently placed on her knees. A sandalwood incense was burning on the small table in front of the bed, and the smoke curled up, giving her pure and beautiful face a sense of holiness. She wore a snow-white dress as thin as a cicada's wing. The snow-white silk clung to her arms and back, faintly revealing her ivory, delicate skin. Although Ning Ku was very thin, her skin was as white as snow. She was not too thin, but looked extremely thin and slender. As soon as a girl of the Digo family was born, the female elders of the family would use a secret formula passed down from their ancestors to bathe her every day. This secret method consumed a lot of precious medicinal materials, and it did not stop until the girl was 7 years old. After using this formula, when the girl grew up, her skin would naturally be as smooth as satin, as white as snow, and as moist as jade, and would have a natural fragrance. Holding such a girl in his arms was really like holding a ball of warm jade and fragrance. Extremely ecstatic. Even a mediocre girl with such a rare skin was qualified to be called a stunner in the world. The Digo family was not the only aristocratic family in the Guanlong group, and the Digo family was not one of the most powerful families in the Guanlong group, but only the Digo family frequently produced empresses, and this was not without reason. However, this formula was only in the hands of the daughter-in-law of the Digo family, and it was only passed on to the daughter-in-law, not the daughter, and only the daughter of the official wife of the Digo family was qualified to use it. Even the daughter of the other branch of the Digo family was not qualified to enjoy it. At this time, Ning Ku was meditating, and this was the yoga kung fu passed down to her by a Tindu yogi. Her congenital chronic disease was difficult to cure, and she could not do other exercises because of her weak body, so she could only use medicine and this gentle yoga technique to regulate her body and mind. Although she was weak and thin, she was not emaciated, which was the credit of this technique. The sunlight came in through the window and shone on Ning Ku's bed. Ning Ku was meditating with her legs crossed, her long hair hanging down, and her graceful charm was like a flowing waterfall between the mountains and rivers. Her beautiful butterfly bones, sunken spine, small waist, and thin body formed a beautiful picture in the soft sunlight. The boat girl came to the girl's room, and after a moment of hesitation, she raised her hand and gently knocked on the door. There was no reply from the other side of the door, and the boat lady did not seem to expect an answer. She knocked on the door, waited for a moment, then gently opened the door and walked in. She stood by the girl's bedside and quietly said, "Yang Longzhong has arrived at the mansion." Ning Ku's eyelids moved slightly, and a pair of lacquered eyes were fixed on the boat girl, and there was a vague expression in her eyes. After helping the girl put on her clothes and put on her hair, the boat girl supported Ning Ku and slowly walked out of the boudoir. Ning Ku was also a lively and active girl when she was young. Later, because of her health, she gradually stayed indoors and became more and more indifferent. She seldom went out, even when she was not in her boudoir, and only occasionally sat on the railing of the building. When guests came to her house, she would not see them. She would only go out to greet the close relatives and elders of her clan when they came. She was born with a chronic disease that had been torturing her delicate body, but she would never show her illness in front of others. She was just lonely, living alone in the crowd, just like Chang, who lived alone in the Moon Palace. She was always cold and indifferent, with a cold temperament and a cold person. Except when she discussed the family's future and important decisions with her brother, the boat girl was the one who talked with her the most. But most of the time, they would not talk more than 5 sentences in a day. The boat girl had taken care of her since she was very young and had long regarded her as her own daughter. She was very sad to see her like this, but she could do nothing until Yang Fan appeared. Yang Fan's appearance was like an elixir. The boat girl found that whenever he appeared, the young miss would talk more, smile more, and be more interested in the things that the young miss usually did not care about. Therefore, when Yang Fan came to the mansion today, there was no need for Miss to receive guests at all. But after thinking for a while, the boat girl came to tell Mississippi sure enough. She was willing to see him. The boat girl was very happy, but she could not show it at all. Miss was delicate, and if she noticed it, she might not leave the boudoir. Little sister, Duguyu was sitting and chatting with Yang Fan in the flower hall. Seeing Ning Ku suddenly coming, he rushed forward to help her. But Ning Ku broke away from his hand without a trace. It was a very inexplicable reason. Everyone knew that she was weak, but she just did not want to appear weak in front of Yang Fan. "Erlang is here." As soon as Ning Ku spoke, her voice was a little bitter because she had not spoken all day. Yang Fan smiled and saluted Miss Ning Ku. "Erlang, take a seat. Don't stand on ceremony." Ning Ku sat down in the seat next to Duguyu, glanced at Yang Fan with a smile, and praised happily. Erlang's poem Crane Cries of the 9 Heights was written in 1 step, and it shocked everyone. After coming back, Ning Ku specially recorded this poem and read it over and over again. "I admire Erlang's talent and learning very much," Duguyu said with a smile. "I just talked about this with Erlang." "Awesome. Really awesome." Erlang walked too fast, so he didn't see the clan heads' dumbfounded and shocked expressions. "Haha," Yang Fan said with a smile. "To tell you the truth, Brother Dugu and Miss Ning Ku, I knew that Grand Duke Li would give me a hint before the banquet, so I wrote this poem at home in advance to scare people." "Haha. Speaking of poetry, I can do it, but it is impossible to write a poem in such a short time." Duguyu was stunned, and then laughed involuntarily. "I knew it. I have been immersed in poetry since I was a child. But how can I be so impatient like Erlang?" After going to the banquet, I was very depressed because of this. It turned out that Erlang had already written this poem. "Haha, Erling is really scheming. Ningke said sweetly, then what about the banquet at Lee's house? Ningke's voice was a little magnetic and hoarse at first, but after a few words, her vocal cords gradually relaxed and became clear and sweet. Yang Fan replied slyly, that poem was also written a long time ago. When I was in Jiaoji, I once attended an elder's birthday banquet and wrote this poem to celebrate his birthday. Now that I am being bullied, I changed the poem a little and used it. Dugayu and Ningke were both stunned and then laughed heartily. Dugayu laughed, but Ningke usually didn't speak much. When she laughed, she couldn't help coughing, but she still laughed even though she coughed. Standing on the side, the boat lady was so happy that she was about to cry tears of joy. She quickly turned her head and wiped her eyes with her sleeves when no one was paying attention. Dugayu laughed so hard that he was out of breath. He pointed at Yang Fan and laughed. You are so cunning. Ningke said, even if it was written a long time ago, it is still a good work. I wonder how long it took Erling to write these 2 poems? Yang Fan said, as long as the poem is drawn up, all that's left is to carefully consider the specific wording and words, so that the antithesis is neat, the tonal tones are alternating, and the rhyme is easy. It's just a word game. How much effort can be put into it? An hour should be enough. When Yang Fan answered, he had already taken a crystal pear from the fruit plate and quickly peeled off the skin with a knife. By the time he finished speaking, a pear had just been peeled. Ningke praised, Erling has never cared much about poetry, but you have such attainments. It is much better than Xingyangzheng used 10 days of writing a poem. Yang Fan said with a smile, for a real poetry master, I actually admire his wonderful words and sentences very much. However, Zheng Yu is a bookworm. His poems should always be lively, but his poems are very conventional. He only cares about the flat and tonal tones and rhyme easily. There is nothing special about it. He is not the material for poetry. After saying that, Yang Fan peeled off the skin of the pear that was still attached to the flesh. He put the crystal-clear pear on a small plate and handed it to Ningke, saying, this is good for your throat and cough. Thank you, Erlang. Ningke gladly took it and sweetly took a bite. Dugayu and the boat lady looked at her with a strange look in their eyes. Ningke was very clean. She never ate food that was handed to her. In addition, she was in poor health and her family was very particular about food, so she was even more picky about food. But when Yang Fan handed it to her, she ate it naturally. Ningke didn't notice that her reaction was abnormal today. She took a bite, and the faint sweetness of the ripe flesh flowed between her lips and teeth. It was sweet in her mouth and sweeter in her heart. Yang Fan didn't know that his casual action was unprecedented for Ningke. After handing over the pear, his joking expression gradually became serious, saying, despise the aristocrats of Shandong, invite Guanlong's wedding, and appease the imperial court. These 3 goals have been achieved. Next, it is time to give the aristocrats of Shandong a strong medicine to force them to bow their heads and make concessions. Is this medicine ready? Dugayu smiled and replied calmly, everything is going well. Don't worry, Erling. I believe that in a few days the result will be clear. Crack! Ningke took a bite of the crisp and sweet pear. Her smiling eyes turned into 2 crescent moons. Dugayu's answer was crisp, and Ningke's bite was also crisp.